At family company's Christmas party, my wife's sister got a BMW $65,000 car and a promotion. I got a $2 bill and a now jobless t-shirt. Everyone laughed, even my wife. I drove away. Then my wife's dad, the CEO, got an email. "Turn on the news," he shouted. What they all saw make them turn pale. You know how they say timing is everything? Well, whoever they are apparently never stood under a crystal chandelier worth more than most people's cars, watching their CEO father-in-law hand out Christmas presents like some twisted corporate Santa Claus. But there I was, nursing a whiskey sour that tasted like expensive regret, surrounded by enough fake snow to make a Disney movie jealous. The Whitmore Dynamics Christmas party was always a production. Gerald Whitmore didn't do anything halfway. Not mergers, not acquisitions, and definitely not holiday parties. This year's theme was Winter Wonderland meets corporate excellence, which basically meant they dumped a small country's GDP into making our glass atrium look like Elsa's fever dream. 20-foot Douglas fir in the center, imported from somewhere that probably required 3 different environmental permits. Fake snow machines working overtime, because God forbid we rely on the actual December weather outside. And that chandelier, oh, that magnificent beast of crystal and pretension, hanging above us like a glittering sword of Damocles. I should have seen it coming. Should have read the room when Gerald kept glancing my way with that shark smile of his. Should have noticed how the conversations died when I walked up to the bar, or how Marla Knox from HR suddenly developed a fascination with her phone screen every time I passed. But no, I was too busy being the good company man, the loyal husband, the guy who built the backbone of this whole operation while everyone else played politics. Sophia looked radiant tonight, I'll give her that. Her silver cocktail dress caught the light just right, and she had that glow people get when they're exactly where they think they belong. She was over by the dessert station with her sister Tessa, both of them giggling like they were still in high school instead of pushing 30. Tessa had this way of throwing her head back when she laughed, all dramatic and attention-seeking, like she was auditioning for a rom-com nobody asked for. Ladies and gentlemen, Gerald's voice boomed through the sound system, cutting through the jazz quartet and the ambient chatter of 200 employees pretending to have fun. The man had a voice that could command a boardroom or sell ice to Eskimos, which, considering tonight's theme, felt oddly appropriate. If I could have your attention for just a moment. The crowd turned toward the makeshift stage they'd set up near the tree. Gerald stood there in his $1,000 suit, looking every inch the benevolent patriarch of our little corporate family. Behind him, a projector displayed the Whitmore Dynamics logo in festive red and green, because subtlety was apparently not on the company credit card. As we celebrate another record year, Gerald continued, his arms spread wide like he was blessing the masses. I want to take a moment to recognize the outstanding contributions of our team members. Record year. Right. Record year built on the middleware I'd designed, the routing protocols I'd optimized, the compliance engines I'd coded while everyone else was busy networking and brown-nosing. But sure, Gerald, tell us all about this record year like it happened through executive vision alone. The DJ, some hipster kid with a man bun and an ironic mustache, killed the music on cue. The timing was so perfect it had to be rehearsed. Tessa practically bounced on her toes, clutching Sophia's arm like she was about to receive the Nobel Prize instead of whatever nepotistic nonsense was coming her way. Tessa Whitmore, Gerald announced, and the crowd erupted in polite applause, has shown exceptional leadership, creative vision, and dedication to the Whitmore family values. Family values. There's a phrase that could mean anything and nothing at the same time. In Gerald's vocabulary, it usually translated to born with the right last name and willing to smile for the cameras. The ribbon box appeared in Gerald's hands like a magic trick. Tessa squealed, actually squealed, like a teenager getting asked to prom, and practically skipped to the stage. The crowd ate it up. Cameras flashed from every angle, because apparently this moment needed to be documented for posterity. Or Instagram. Hard to tell the difference these days. Tessa opened the box with theatrical precision, gasping at the BMW key fob like she'd never seen luxury before. Which was rich, considering she'd been driving daddy's cars since she was 16. But the crowd didn't know that. The crowd saw a young executive being rewarded for her hard work and innovative thinking. And with this promotion to Vice President of Brand Strategy, Gerald continued, his voice dripping with paternal pride, comes all the responsibilities and privileges that our senior leadership enjoys. VP of Brand Strategy. The girl who'd spent the last 6 months posting motivational quotes on LinkedIn and calling it market research was now a VP. The same girl who thought synergy was a type of yoga and pivot was something you did in basketball. But hey, family values, right? The confetti cannons went off like we were celebrating New Year's Eve, sending streams of gold and silver paper floating down like expensive dandruff. Some landed in my whiskey sour. I picked out a piece shaped like a star and flicked it onto the marble floor, where it joined about 1,000,000 others. Sophia caught my eye from across the room and gave me that look, the one that said, "Be happy for my sister," mixed with, "Don't you dare make a scene." I raised my glass in a mock toast, because what else was I supposed to do? Stand up and read my resume out loud? List every patent filing with my name on it? Explain to the room how the technology stack they were celebrating literally wouldn't exist without me? That's when Gerald's eyes found mine across the crowd. That predator smile spread across his face like oil on water, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the air conditioning they were pumping through the vents to combat all that fake snow. "But wait," Gerald said, his voice taking on that game show host quality that rich people use when they think they're being charming. "There's one more gift to give out tonight." The crowd turned to follow his gaze, and suddenly I was the center of attention. Great. Just fucking great. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the catering staff paused with their silver trays, sensing drama in the air like sharks smelling blood. Gerald waved a gift bag in my direction, not wrapped like Tessa's box, just a plain bag from some high-end store. "Come on up here, son," he called out, and the son dripped with just enough mockery to make sure everyone heard it but couldn't quite call him on it. I walked through the crowd like I was walking through molasses. Every step felt deliberate, measured, while conversations resumed in hushed whispers around me. I could hear fragments. "Poor guy, saw it coming, about time," and realized that half the room knew what was happening before I did. Gerald handed me the bag with a flourish that probably looked generous from the back row, but felt like a loaded gun up close. "Open it up," he encouraged, and the crowd pressed closer like they were watching a public execution. Which, in retrospect, they kind of were. Inside the bag, a crisp $2 bill and a black t-shirt folded with military precision. I lifted the shirt and shook it out, the fabric falling to reveal white block letters that might as well have been written in neon. "Now jobless." The laughter started somewhere in the back and rolled forward like a wave, gaining momentum as it hit the marble and bounced off the glass walls. It was the kind of laughter that feeds on itself, growing bigger and meaner with each echo. Even the jazz quartet stopped playing to stare. Sophia's laugh was the one that cut deepest. Not because it was the loudest, though it was, but because of how she reached over to pat my chest afterward, like I was a good dog who'd just done a particularly amusing trick. "Oh, honey," she said, loud enough for the nearest 20 people to hear. "You should have seen your face." I stood there holding that shirt, feeling 200 pairs of eyes on me, listening to laughter that sounded like breaking glass. Gerald watched me with the satisfaction of a man who'd just won a chess game he'd been playing for months. Tessa clutched her new car keys and giggled behind her hand like we were at a comedy show instead of a professional gathering. The smart play would have been to laugh along, to make some self-deprecating joke about finally having time for my hobbies, or now Sophia can't complain about me working late, to turn their cruelty into crowd-pleasing humor and walk away with whatever dignity intact. Instead, I folded that shirt with the same careful precision Gerald's people probably used to plan this little performance. Placed it back in the bag, closed the top, took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. "Thank you," I said, loud enough for the room to hear, but quiet enough to sound sincere. "This is exactly what I needed." The laughter faltered, confused by my tone. Gerald's smile flickered like a bad connection. Because "thank you" wasn't in their script, and sincerity wasn't supposed to be my weapon of choice. I walked toward the valet desk with measured steps, past Gene Park, who mouthed sorry, with genuine regret in his eyes, past CFO Owen Pike, who raised his champagne glass like he was toasting my funeral, past Marla Knox, who suddenly developed an urgent need to check her clipboard. "Sir?" the valet kid asked, probably 19 and working this gig for beer money. looking nervous about getting caught in whatever corporate drama was unfolding behind us. The gray sedan, I told him, handing over my ticket. Take your time. No one followed me. Not even Sophia. She was too busy accepting congratulations for her sister's promotion and playing the part of the loyal corporate wife. The laughter had resumed behind me, already moving on to the next conversation, the next joke, the next moment of manufactured holiday cheer. But as I waited for my car, keys jingling in the valet kid's nervous hands, I couldn't stop smiling. Because they thought they'd won. They thought public humiliation was the end of the story. They had no idea it was just the beginning. The garage beneath Whitmore Dynamics felt like a concrete tomb, all echoing footsteps and fluorescent lights that buzzed with the intensity of angry wasps. The cold December air bit through my suit jacket as I walked toward my car, a 12-year-old Honda Civic that looked embarrassingly out of place next to the parade of German luxury sedans and electric penis extensions parked in the executive section. But that old gray sedan was mine, paid for with honest money, not daddy's trust fund or corporate kickbacks disguised as performance bonuses. The valet kid handed me the keys with the kind of careful politeness you use around someone who might be having a mental breakdown. "Have a good evening, sir," he said, like he was defusing a bomb instead of returning car keys to a guy who'd just been publicly humiliated by his boss/father-in-law. "Thanks, kid. You too." I tipped him $20, money I probably shouldn't have been throwing around, considering I was now officially unemployed, but he'd been the only person all evening who treated me like a human being instead of entertainment. The garage door opened with a mechanical groan that sounded like the building itself was relieved to see me go. I pulled out into the December night, watching the Whitmore Tower shrink in my rearview mirror until it was just another collection of office lights trying to make themselves important against the darkness. The party was still going on up there in their Crystal Palace. Probably would until 2 in the morning, because nothing says executive leadership like drinking on company time while your workforce goes home to their mortgages and student loans. My phone started buzzing before I hit the first traffic light. Text after text lighting up the dashboard like a Christmas tree made of corporate condolences and drunk executive emojis. Owen Pike sent a martini glass and a laughing crying face. Marla Knox went with the classic thinking of you followed by a prayer hands emoji, because apparently losing your job was now something that required divine intervention. Even some of the junior engineers were chiming in with various versions of "dude, that was brutal," and "sorry man." I hit the silence button and watched them all disappear. Fuck their sympathy. Fuck their after-the-fact courage. Where were these people when Gerald was setting up his little comedy show? Where were they when I was getting thrown under the bus in front of 200 witnesses? Probably thinking about their own job security and wondering if they'd be next on the chopping block. The roads were slick with that kind of winter moisture that makes everything look like a black mirror. I took the long way home, or what used to be home before I started sleeping in motels and planning for exactly this moment. The route took me past the Millfield River, where the city lights reflected on the dark water like a broken necklace some rich woman had thrown away in a fit of rage. Seemed appropriate, considering how my own life had just shattered into expensive, glittering pieces. I thought about every late night I'd spend in that office building, every weekend I'd sacrificed to Gerald's urgent deadlines that somehow always coincided with his golf tournaments or family vacations. 7 years of building their digital infrastructure from the ground up, 7 years of making Gerald look like a visionary leader when really he was just a trust fund baby with good hair and a talent for taking credit. The middleware layer that handled all their client communications? Mine. The routing protocols that kept their data flowing smoothly between departments? Also mine. The compliance audit engine that Gerald loved to brag about during federal contract negotiations? Surprise! That masterpiece came from my keyboard too, coded during a particularly inspired bout of insomnia, while Sophia complained about me working too much. Family excellence, Gerald had called it during his presentation to the Pentagon. Family excellence. Like the Whitmore gene pool had somehow produced technological innovation through pure bloodline superiority instead of relying on the contractors they treated like disposable assets. I stopped at a red light next to a bus stop where someone had graffitied "Eat the Rich" in dripping red letters. Subtle, but I appreciated the sentiment, especially considering I'd just been fed to said rich people like chum to sharks. The light turned green, and I accelerated past a homeless guy with a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps." I made a mental note to circle back. After tonight, we might have more in common than I cared to admit. That's when I started laughing. Not the polite corporate chuckle I'd perfected over the years, but real laughter that started in my chest and bubbled up like champagne shaken too hard. Because they thought they'd broken me. They thought public humiliation and a joke t-shirt were the end of my story. Gerald probably went to bed tonight feeling like he'd taught me a valuable lesson about knowing my place in the pecking order. The thing about being underestimated is that it gives you room to maneuver. While Gerald was busy playing Daddy CEO and Sophia was shopping for designer handbags, I'd been building something they didn't even know existed. Something clean, something legal, something that would make tonight's party trick look like amateur hour. My phone buzzed again, not a text this time, but a call from Miguel Alvarez. Miguel, my old college roommate who'd gone on to become CTO at ArcVantage Labs, one of Whitmore's biggest competitors. Miguel, who'd been quietly recruiting me for months with the kind of offers that would make a grown man weep. Miguel, who'd sent me a very specific text message 2 days ago. Weather looks clear. Weather looks clear. Our old code from freshman year computer science. Back when we thought we were so clever with our secret phrases and elaborate pranks. It meant all the signatures were in place, all the legal documents filed, all the chess pieces positioned for checkmate. It meant the plan we'd been cooking up for the better part of a year was finally ready to execute. I let it ring. Not because I didn't want to talk to Miguel. Hell, talking to someone who actually respected my work sounded like heaven right about now. But because this moment deserved to be savored. This drive through the city that had watched me build something beautiful and then handed me a pink slip wrapped in tissue paper and malicious glee. The radio was playing some generic holiday music, the kind of sanitized Christmas cheer that sounds like it was focus grouped to death. I switched it off and drove in silence, listening to the hum of my engine and the whisper of tires on wet asphalt. The city looked different tonight, like I was seeing it through new eyes. Clearer eyes. Eyes that weren't clouded by loyalty or false hope or the desperate need to belong somewhere that never wanted me in the first place. I passed the Thai place where Sophia and I used to go for date nights, back when she actually wanted to spend time with someone who worked for a living instead of inherited it. Past the coffee shop where I'd had my first interview with Gerald, back when he was still pretending to care about qualifications instead of just looking for someone smart enough to build his empire and naive enough not to ask for equity. 7 years. 7 fucking years of giving that company everything I had. Every innovative idea, every breakthrough moment, every late-night epiphany that moved their stock price another few points north. And what did I have to show for it? A salary that was good but not great, a wife who laughed when her father humiliated me, and a t-shirt that summed up their opinion of my contributions in 2 simple words. But here's what they didn't know. I'd been filing patent applications under my own name for the last 18 months. Perfectly legal, perfectly documented, all the I's dotted and T's crossed by the best IP lawyer Gerald's money could buy. Ironically, the same firm that handled Whitmore's legal work, though they kept different clients in separate silos for exactly this reason. They didn't know about North Star Relay, my little LLC that rented space in a brick building across town and had been quietly licensing technology back to Whitmore under terms that looked generous until you read the fine print. They didn't know about the kill switches I'd built into every critical system, the backdoors that looked like standard administrative access but were actually my insurance policy against exactly this kind of corporate backstabbing. Most importantly, they didn't know that the federal logistics contract Gerald loved to wave around like a trophy, the one that was supposed to cement Whitmore's position as a major government vendor, was entirely dependent on my compliance audit engine. The engine that ran on a temporary license that expired at midnight on December 31st unless certain payment and security requirements were met. Requirements that, according to my very careful documentation, Whitmore had been failing to meet for the past 6 months. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner that specialized in grease and regret, the kind of place where truck drivers and night shift workers went to carb load before facing another shift of American capitalism. The neon sign flickered between open and op-in, which felt like a metaphor for something, but I was too emotionally exhausted to figure out what. My phone lit up again, this time with a text from Sophia. Where did you go? People are asking. People are asking. Not, I'm worried about you, or are you okay, or even, what the hell just happened back there? Just concern about what people might think if the guest of honor at their little humiliation party had the audacity to leave early. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. Everything from the honest truth about what I really thought of her family to elaborate explanations of why I couldn't stay and watch them celebrate my professional execution. In the end, I went with something simple. Needed some air. See you at home. Except I wouldn't be going home. Home was a mortgage on a house I couldn't afford without a job, shared with a wife who'd just proven that blood was thicker than marriage vows. Home was a collection of furniture and memories that belonged to a different version of me. The version that still believed hard work mattered more than birthright. That loyalty was a two-way street. That family meant something beyond shared DNA and financial convenience. Instead, I was going to drive to that brick building across town and make sure everything was ready for tomorrow's news cycle. Because if Gerald wanted to play games, I was about to show him what happened when you humiliated someone who'd spent 7 years learning all your secrets and building all your weapons. The funny thing about being stabbed in the back is that it clarifies everything. All those moments of doubt, all those times I'd wondered if I was being paranoid or oversensitive, all those little slights and overlooked contributions suddenly made perfect sense. They'd never seen me as family. They'd seen me as a useful tool, and now that they thought they didn't need me anymore, they were throwing me away with about as much ceremony as you'd give a broken stapler. But tools work both ways. And tomorrow morning, they were going to learn the difference between owning someone and needing them. I started the engine and pulled back onto the road, leaving the diner's neon glow behind me as I headed toward the future I'd been building in secret. The party was over, but the real show was about to begin. The parking lot of 1247 Industrial Way looked like the kind of place where dreams go to die. Cracked asphalt, weeds growing through concrete, and a flickering streetlight that probably hadn't been serviced since the Clinton administration. But that shitty little brick building was about to become ground zero for the most expensive lesson Gerald Whitmore had ever received, and the best part was that he'd paid for it himself through 7 years of my generous salary. I slid my keycard through the reader. Yeah, that's right, keycard access to a building that looked like it should be condemned, and listened to the satisfying beep that meant I was home. Not home like the McMansion I'd been sharing with Sophia and her collection of throw pillows that cost more than most people's rent, but home like a place where I could finally stop pretending to be someone else's idea of success. The lobby, and I use that term loosely, consisted of a folding table, a dying rubber plant that I'd named Wilson after the volleyball in Castaway, and a motivational poster someone had left behind that read teamwork, because sometimes you can't do it all yourself. Ironic, considering I'd spent the last year doing exactly that while Gerald took credit and Sophia planned shopping trips to celebrate our achievements. Northstar Relay LLC occupied exactly 2 rooms and a server closet on the second floor of this architectural masterpiece. Room 1 was what I generously called the conference area. A card table, 2 mismatched chairs from a garage sale, and a whiteboard covered in coffee stains and the kind of brilliant scribbles that only make sense at 3 in the morning when you're hopped up on energy drinks and pure spite. Room 2 was the development lab, which sounded way fancier than the place where I kept my good computer and a mini fridge full of Red Bull. But it was the server closet that made this whole operation worthwhile. Behind a door marked Authorized Personnel Only, because I had a sense of humor about these things, a rack of humming hardware connected to fiber optic cables that would make NASA jealous. This wasn't some hobbyist setup cobbled together from Amazon Basics. This was enterprise-grade equipment that I'd been accumulating piece by piece, always paying cash, always keeping the receipts, always making sure everything was legal and traceable and absolutely fucking bulletproof. The smell hit me as soon as I opened the closet door. Ozone from the servers, that metallic tang of solder from late-night hardware modifications, and just a hint of the vanilla air freshener I'd hung up to mask the fact that I'd been practically living here for months. Home sweet home, population, me and about 50,000 lines of code that were about to change everything. I powered up the main workstation and watched the screens come alive with the kind of beautiful chaos that only a systems architect could appreciate. Network diagrams that looked like electronic spider webs, database schemas that would make a mathematician weep, and monitoring dashboards that tracked every heartbeat of every system running Whitmore's precious empire. Because here's the thing about being the guy who builds the foundation. You get to decide exactly how strong that foundation really is. The corkboard above my desk told the whole story in 4 neat rows of paper. Patent Application 847291. A. Distributed Middleware Communication Layer with Adaptive Load Balancing. Patent Application 847291. B. Resilient Network Routing Protocol with Autonomous Failure Detection. Patent Application 847291. C. Real-Time Compliance Audit Engine for Federal Contract Verification. And my personal favorite, Patent Application 847291D. Machine Identity Vault with Cryptographic Chain of Custody. All filed under my name. All assigned to Northstar Relay. All perfectly, absolutely, completely legal under the intellectual property clauses buried in page 37 of my employment contract. Clauses that Gerald's lawyers had written to protect Whitmore from employee theft, not realizing they'd created a loophole big enough to drive a fucking semi-truck through. C. When you write IP protections that say, work product developed using company resources becomes company property, you better make damn sure you define what constitutes company resources. And when the employee in question has been working nights and weekends in his own lab, using his own equipment, solving problems that the company never officially asked him to solve, well, that's when things get interesting from a legal standpoint. I'd been documenting everything for 18 months. Every email thread where Gerald pushed back my resource requests. Every budget meeting where they cut my team's funding while increasing marketing's budget for brand awareness initiatives, aka Tessa's Instagram consulting fees. Every security audit I'd recommended that got shelved because we'll deal with that next quarter. Every time they'd told me to make do with what I had while they bought themselves new offices and executive retreats to align on strategic vision. Priya Desai, my lawyer, had reviewed every filing, every assignment document, every licensing agreement with the kind of thoroughness that made her worth every penny of her ridiculous hourly rate. It's airtight, she'd told me last week over coffee in her downtown office that probably cost more per square foot than most people's apartments. They've been licensing your technology for months without knowing it. The moment they breach payment or security covenants, you can revoke access entirely. And oh, had they breached those covenants? The security requirements alone were like a greatest hits collection of corporate negligence. Unpatched systems, default passwords on critical infrastructure, administrative accounts shared via sticky notes, and my personal favorite, Owen Pike using password 123 for his CFO credentials because apparently cybersecurity was too complicated for someone making high six figures. I logged into the escrow agent's dashboard and confirmed what Miguel had been hinting at in his cryptic texts. ArcVantage's payment had cleared that afternoon. Not just cleared, but cleared big. 7 figures big. The kind of money that would let me tell Gerald Whitmore exactly where he could shove his now jobless t-shirt while wearing a smile that could power a small city. The license flip over timers were already set. Midnight tonight, Whitmore's access to my core systems would expire unless they met specific payment and security requirements that I'd been documenting their failure to meet for months. At 12:01 a.m., those same licenses would automatically transfer to ArcVantage under our exclusive partnership agreement, an agreement that Gerald would probably find out about when his morning coffee was interrupted by some very unhappy phone calls from very important government officials. I pulled up the draft email I'd been perfecting for the better part of 6 months. Every word chosen for maximum legal impact and minimum emotional satisfaction, because this wasn't about revenge, this was about business. The subject line was beautifully bland. Notice of license termination due to covenant breach. The body read like something generated by the world's most polite sociopath. Dear Whitmore Dynamics Leadership Team, per Section 9.2 of License Agreement WDL 2024-047 executed between Northstar Relay LLC and Whitmore Dynamics Incorporated. This notice serves to inform you that the temporary grace period for compliance violations will end at 0:01 Eastern Standard Time on December 23, 2024. As documented in our previous communications dated October 15, November 3, and December 1, the following covenant breaches remain unresolved. Failure to implement required security protocols, Section 4.2.a. Non-payment of quarterly licensing fees, Section 6.1.b. Unauthorized modification of core systems, Section 8.3.c. Failure to maintain required audit trails, Section 9.1.d. Effective 0/01 December 23, 2024, access to all Northstar Relay intellectual property will be revoked, including but not limited to the distributed middleware communication layer, resilient routing protocol, compliance audit engine, and machine identity vault. This action is taken in accordance with the terms agreed upon by both parties and is non-negotiable. Regards. Northstar Relay LLC. Beautiful, wasn't it? Cold as a morgue and twice as final. No emotion, no personal attacks, no mention of t-shirts or public humiliation or the fact that Gerald's family values were worth about as much as a Confederate dollar in a modern economy. Just pure, devastating business communication that would hit their legal department like a freight train carrying legal dynamite. The best part, the absolute chef's kiss of this whole operation, was that Gerald had been bragging about that federal logistics contract for months. The one that was supposed to prove Whitmore could handle government-level security and compliance requirements. The one that required real-time audit trails and cryptographic verification of every transaction. The one that was built entirely on my compliance audit engine and would fail spectacularly the moment that engine went dark. I opened a new tab and checked the news feeds, making sure Harper Quinn had everything she needed for her morning bombshell. Harper, the investigative business reporter who'd been sniffing around Owen Pike's creative expense reports like a bloodhound with a journalism degree. Harper, who was about to receive a very interesting collection of documents that would make her Christmas morning feel like, well, Christmas morning. Travel receipts that didn't match any legitimate business meetings. Contractor payments to shell companies that existed only on paper. Email chains where Owen pressured suppliers into marketing rebates that looked suspiciously like kickbacks when you added up the numbers. And my personal favorite, a paper trail showing how Owen had been billing his daughter's private school tuition as executive education expenses. The SEC was going to have a field day. Martha Stewart went to prison for less. I leaned back in my chair and looked around at this little kingdom I'd built in secret. Coffee-stained whiteboards covered with architectural diagrams that would revolutionize enterprise communication. Hardware that hummed with the kind of quiet confidence that came from being built right the first time. Patent filings that would make other companies pay me royalties for the next 20 years. Tomorrow morning, Gerald would wake up to a world where his golden boy son-in-law had disappeared and taken his entire technical infrastructure with him. Tomorrow morning, Sophia would realize that her husband wasn't just some grateful employee who should be happy to work for family. He was the guy who'd been keeping the lights on while her relatives played dress-up as business leaders. Tomorrow morning, they'd learn what happened when you treated talent like it was disposable and then threw it away in front of 200 witnesses. I closed the email draft and saved it to send at exactly midnight. Not because I needed the dramatic timing. This wasn't a movie, after all. But because contracts were contracts, and I'd honored every clause right up until the moment they decided to turn my termination into dinner theater. The rubber plant in the corner seemed to approve, or maybe that was just the way the server lights reflected off its leaves. Either way, Wilson had been a better colleague than most of the people I'd left behind at that party. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, taking one last look at the operation that was about to become the most expensive practical joke in corporate history. Tomorrow, I'd be back to start building something new. Something that belonged to me. Something that nobody could take away with a gift bag and a smirk. But tonight I had a few more hours to be officially employed by Whitmore Dynamics, and I planned to make the most of them. My phone lit up like a slot machine hitting jackpot, except instead of coins, I was getting a cascade of digital desperation from the Whitmore family dynasty. Sophia's name flashed across the screen first, probably calling to explain why she'd laughed along with Daddy's little comedy routine, or maybe to ask if I was being dramatic by leaving early. Like watching your husband get publicly humiliated was just another Tuesday night, and I was the one overreacting. I let it ring, then ring again, then a third time, because apparently my wife had never heard of taking a hint. The voicemail notification popped up, and I could already imagine her tone. That particular blend of condescension and fake concern she perfected during our marriage, the voice she used when she wanted to sound supportive while actually telling me I was wrong about everything. Then Gerald's name appeared, because of course it did. The man who'd just handed me a t-shirt proclaiming my unemployment in front of his entire company was now calling like we were old buddies who needed to clear the air. I watched his call go to voicemail too, then immediately light up again, because Gerald Whitmore was not the kind of man who accepted being ignored by people he considered beneath him. The third caller was Tessa, and that's when I knew they were starting to panic. Princess Tessa, fresh VP of brand strategy, who probably thought her new title gave her some kind of diplomatic immunity in family disputes. Her text appeared before I could decide whether to answer. It was a joke. Lighten up, face blowing a kiss. A joke, right? Because nothing says comedy gold like publicly firing someone at a Christmas party while their wife laughs and their coworkers applaud. Ha fucking ha, Tessa. Maybe for your next joke, you can explain that one to the SEC when they start asking questions about your well-deserved promotion and whether it had anything to do with actual qualifications or just happened to coincide with your last name. I turned off all notifications and watched my phone go silent for the first time in years. Amazing how peaceful life could be when you stopped letting other people's emergencies become your problems. No more late-night calls from Gerald demanding I fix whatever his latest hire had broken. No more texts from Sophia complaining that I worked too much while simultaneously expecting me to maintain our lifestyle on a salary that was good, but not private school for future kids, good. Instead, I dialed Priya Desai, because when you're about to detonate someone's entire business model, you want the kind of lawyer who charges $400 an hour and earns every penny of it. Priya was the type of woman who wore power suits like armor and could dissect a contract like a forensic pathologist examining a murder victim. She was also the only person in my life who'd told me the truth about what Gerald was really planning. I've been waiting for your call, she said before I could even identify myself. Her voice had that crisp efficiency that came from billing in 6-minute increments and never wasting a second of anyone's time, especially her own. I assumed tonight went exactly as we predicted. T-shirt and everything. I confirmed, settling back into my car seat and watching the brick building that housed my real future. Gerald's got a real flair for the dramatic. Should have gone into theater instead of inheriting a tech company. Perfect. The afternoon wire from ArcVantage cleared escrow at 3:47 p.m. 7 figures, as promised. The second license agreement, exclusive global rights to your patent portfolio, goes live at midnight when Whitmore's access expires. I could hear papers rustling in the background, the sound of someone who had her shit together while everyone else was stumbling around in the dark. Miguel Alvarez called my office an hour ago to confirm final details. He sounds very pleased with the arrangement. Miguel, my old college buddy who'd gone on to bigger and better things while I was busy being Gerald's favorite technical whipping boy. Miguel, who'd been quietly recruiting me for months while I was still trying to make things work with Whitmore. Miguel, who'd looked at my patent portfolio like a kid in a candy store and immediately started talking about partnership agreements and revenue sharing and all the things that happen when companies actually value innovation instead of just exploiting it. There's something else, Priya continued, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Harper Quinn called this afternoon. She's running the Pike story tomorrow morning. Early edition, front page of the business section. She wanted me to thank you for the documentation package. Harper Quinn, the investigative reporter who'd been circling Owen Pike like a shark that had smelled blood in the water but couldn't quite locate the source. The woman who'd built her career exposing corporate corruption and had been looking for a way into Whitmore's books for the better part of a year. The journalist who was about to receive enough evidence to keep her busy until Easter. How bad is it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'd been collecting Owen's dirty laundry for months. Every questionable expense report, every suspicious vendor payment, every creative interpretation of business necessity that would make an accountant break out in hives. Bad enough to trigger an SEC inquiry, probably within the week. The shell company payments alone are worth their own investigation. Add in the vendor kickbacks and the personal expenses he's been writing off as business costs. Priya paused for dramatic effect, because even lawyers appreciated good timing. Let's just say Owen's going to need a very good criminal defense attorney, and soon. I thought about Owen at the party tonight. raising his champagne glass in my direction like he was toasting my downfall. Pompous bastard probably went home feeling like he'd participated in some kind of corporate team-building exercise, bonding with the boss by laughing at the hired help. Tomorrow he'd wake up to federal investigators asking very pointed questions about his travel expenses and vendor relationships. "There's one more thing," I said, watching a security guard make his rounds through the parking lot, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like he was searching for problems that weren't there. "Ray Holt warned me months ago that something was coming. Said to watch my back." Ray Holt, Whitmore's head of security, was old-school law enforcement who'd retired from the FBI to babysit corporate executives and their various legal liabilities. He'd seen enough white-collar crime to recognize the warning signs, and apparently he'd been seeing plenty of warning signs around the Whitmore family tree. Ray didn't say much. 20 years of federal service had taught him the value of keeping his mouth shut, but when he did speak, smart people listened. "Watch your back," he'd told me 3 months ago, cornering me by the coffee machine during one of my rare visits to the actual office. "Things are moving upstairs. Not good things." He'd walked away before I could ask for details, but the message was clear. Whatever Gerald was planning, it wasn't going to end well for me. Funny how being right doesn't make you feel better when you're the target. "Ray's a smart man," Priya said, her voice carrying the kind of respect that came from dealing with too many cases where someone should have listened to the warning signs. "He probably saw the writing on the wall before Gerald even started planning his little Christmas surprise." Speaking of which, you might want to prepare for some interesting phone calls over the next few days. From who? Everyone. The board will want to know how their star technology just walked out the door. Investors will want explanations for why their federal contracts are suddenly at risk. Gerald will want to negotiate, probably with threats first, then money, then more threats. And Sophia. She paused, and I could practically hear her choosing her words carefully. "Well, that's between you and your marriage counselor." Marriage counselor. Right. Because the problem with my marriage was communication issues, not the fact that my wife had just publicly chosen her family's money over basic human decency. But that was a problem for future me to solve, along with finding a new place to live and figuring out what the hell I was going to do with my life now that I'd burned down my old one. "The important thing," Priya continued, "is that you don't engage with any of them directly. All communication goes through me from here on out. Gerald's going to try every trick in the book: guilt, anger, intimidation, bribery, and you need to let me handle it. You've got the high ground now, but only if you don't do anything stupid. Stupid like answering Sophia's calls to hear her explain why watching her husband get destroyed was somehow funny. Stupid like listening to Gerald's threats about lawsuits and non-compete clauses that had more holes than Swiss cheese. Stupid like feeling guilty for protecting work that was legally mine while they'd been planning to screw me over for months. Don't worry," I told her, watching another security guard complete his circuit and disappear into the shadows between buildings. "I'm done being stupid." That ended about 4 hours ago when they handed me that t-shirt. "Good. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be very interesting." I hung up and sat in the silence of my car, engine cooling with little ticking sounds that reminded me of a countdown timer. Somewhere across town, Gerald was probably sleeping the sleep of someone who thought he'd won. Sophia was probably removing her makeup and wondering why her husband was being such a drama queen about a harmless family joke. Tessa was probably posting Instagram stories about her amazing promotion and her amazing new car and her amazing life that was built on someone else's work. And Owen Pike was definitely sleeping like a man who had no idea that tomorrow morning would bring very uncomfortable questions from very serious people with federal badges. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number that just said "Security Chief says hello. Good luck tomorrow. Ray Holt," checking in from whatever burner phone security professionals used when they wanted to send messages that wouldn't show up in corporate discovery requests. I smiled and typed back, "Tell the chief thanks for the heads up. Storm's coming." Then I started the car and drove toward my motel, leaving behind the brick building that would tomorrow become the most important address in Gerald Whitmore's rapidly deteriorating life. The radio played soft rock classics, the kind of music that made everything feel like a movie montage, and for the first time in years, I felt like the hero instead of the comic relief. Tomorrow, they'd learn what happened when you confused kindness with weakness, when you mistook loyalty for stupidity, when you thought someone's value was determined by their willingness to accept abuse. Tomorrow, the weather was going to be very fucking clear indeed. 11:59 p.m. I sat in my car outside the brick building, engine off, watching the dashboard clock tick toward the moment when Gerald Whitmore's world would officially start falling apart. Funny how the most important moments in life happen when nobody's watching. No cameras, no confetti cannons, no audience of drunk executives applauding your destruction. Just me, a countdown timer, and enough digital dynamite to level a corporate empire. My phone buzzed with a secure message from Miguel, standing by. "You sure about this?" Was I sure? Hell yes, I was sure. I'd been sure since the moment Gerald handed me that gift bag with a smirk that said I was nothing more than entertainment for his family's amusement. I'd been sure since Sophia patted my chest like I was a good dog who'd just performed a trick. I'd been sure since 200 people laughed while I folded that t-shirt and walked away in silence. Green light, I typed back. The clock hit midnight. On my laptop screen, the escrow agent's dashboard refreshed automatically. License status, transferred. The ArcVantage flags flipped from yellow to green like Christmas lights coming online. Every patent, every piece of code, every digital asset that had been powering Whitmore's record year now belonged to their biggest competitor. I clicked send on the termination email. Somewhere across the city, Gerald's phone was lighting up with automated alerts from systems he probably didn't even know existed. Security protocols failing. Database connections timing out. The compliance audit engine, the one that kept his precious federal contract valid, going dark like someone had pulled the plug on his life support. My phone pinged with another secure message. "We're live. Press release cues at 6 a.m. Welcome to ArcVantage." The press release. God, I'd helped Miguel craft that beautiful piece of corporate theater. ArcVantage Labs announces exclusive partnership with Northstar Relay, expanding federal compliance capabilities. Professional, boring, and absolutely devastating once people connected the dots between my patent portfolio and Whitmore's sudden technical difficulties. I walked into the building one last time, taking the stairs to my little kingdom of servers and stolen time. The closet hummed with quiet satisfaction, all those machines processing the transition like they'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. On the main console, a tiny blue light that had been blinking yellow for months finally settled into steady blue. The hardware key had accepted its new master. It was done. In 12 hours, when Gerald dragged himself out of bed expecting another day of playing CEO with someone else's technology, he'd discover that his entire infrastructure had vanished overnight. Not stolen, transferred. Not hacked, legally revoked. Not sabotaged, just business. I grabbed the framed $2 bill from my desk, Gerald's little joke gift that was about to become my favorite decoration, and headed for the door. Tomorrow I'd be back to start the real work, building something new with Miguel and a team that actually understood the difference between innovation and inheritance. But tonight, I had one more stop to make. The Days Inn on Route 9 wasn't exactly the Four Seasons, but it had two things I needed: cable TV and a deadbolt that actually worked. I'd been calling it home for the past 3 weeks, ever since I realized that sharing a bed with someone who'd rather laugh at your humiliation than defend your dignity wasn't really what marriage was supposed to be about. The room smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and broken dreams, but at least it was honest about what it was. My phone buzzed at 5:47 a.m. with a text from Harper Quinn. "We're running a package at 6:05 a.m. Hope you're ready." Ready? Lady, I'd been ready since Gerald first started treating me like his personal tech support instead of the architect who'd built his entire digital empire. I'd been ready since the first board meeting where he took credit for my innovations while I sat in the back like hired help. I'd been ready since Sophia started introducing me as my husband who works for Daddy, instead of the guy who actually made Daddy's company functional. But yeah, Harper, I was ready. I made coffee with the little machine that probably hadn't been cleaned since Bush was president, the first Bush, and settled in to watch the morning news like it was the Super Bowl and Christmas rolled into one beautiful, career-destroying package. The local station was running their usual mix of weather updates, traffic reports, and human interest stories about rescued puppies, but I knew that was about to change in about 10 minutes. 6 o'clock came and went with nothing. Then 6:02. Then 6:03. I started wondering if Harper had chickened out, if maybe Gerald's lawyers had gotten to her editor, if maybe this was all going to fizzle out like a wet firecracker on the 4th of July. Then, at 6:05 a.m. exactly, the screen flashed breaking news in letters big enough to read from space. Good morning. This is Jennifer Walsh with Channel 7 News. We're following breaking developments in a story that could have major implications for federal contracting and corporate governance. Whitmore Dynamics, the technology company that recently secured a major logistics contract with the Pentagon, is facing what sources are calling a compliance crisis following the sudden revocation of critical software licenses. They put Whitmore's logo on screen, that pretentious mountain peak design that was supposed to represent reaching new heights, but looked more like a pyramid scheme's fever dream. The same logo that had been plastered all over the Christmas party while they handed out BMWs to unqualified family members and unemployment to the guy who built their technical foundation. The company's stock has been halted pending investigation into what federal officials are describing as potential noncompliance with security protocols required for government contracts. The license revocation affects multiple core systems, including what sources describe as the backbone of Whitmore's audit and compliance infrastructure. Beautiful. Just fucking beautiful. I could picture Gerald right now, probably still in his silk pajamas, watching his company's stock price disappear while he tried to figure out how his disposable son-in-law had just nuked his entire operation from orbit. But wait, it got better. The screen cut to footage of Gerald arriving at Whitmore headquarters, and holy shit, the man looked like he'd aged about 10 years overnight. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie was crooked, and he had that deer-in-headlights expression that rich people get when reality finally catches up with their bullshit. Reporters were shouting questions at him like he was walking a perp walk instead of just going to work. Mr. Whitmore, can you comment on the license termination? Sir, how will this affect your federal contracts? What's your response to allegations of security violations? Gerald pushed through the crowd with the kind of forced smile that politicians use right before they resign in disgrace, muttering something about looking into the situation and confident in our legal position. Translation: we're fucked, and we have no idea how it happened. Then Jennifer Walsh was back, and she had that gleam in her eye that news anchors get when they know they're about to drop a bombshell that'll have everyone talking around the water cooler. But that's not the only story developing at Whitmore Dynamics this morning. Channel 7's investigative team has obtained internal documents suggesting a pattern of questionable financial practices involving Chief Financial Officer Owen Pike. And there it was. Harper's masterpiece, complete with document graphics and everything. Travel expenses that would make a Saudi prince blush. Vendor contracts with shell companies that existed only on paper. Email chains showing Owen pressuring suppliers into marketing rebates that looked suspiciously like kickbacks when you added up the numbers. My personal favorite was the graphic showing Owen's daughter's private school tuition being billed as executive education expenses, because apparently learning advanced finger painting at Manhattan Prep Academy was crucial to Whitmore's corporate strategy. The Securities and Exchange Commission has announced a preliminary inquiry into these allegations, with sources suggesting that a formal investigation could be launched as early as next week. I actually laughed out loud. Not the polite chuckle I'd been using for 7 years of corporate meetings, but real laughter that started in my chest and bubbled up like champagne. Owen Pike, the same pompous asshole who'd raised his glass to toast my humiliation, was about to become very familiar with federal prison cuisine. My phone started blowing up. Not with calls this time. Apparently they'd finally figured out that I wasn't answering, but with texts that read like a Greek chorus of corporate panic. Gene Park. They're pale as paper. Systems are degrading. Emergency board meeting in 1 hour. Some random engineer from the networking team. Dude, everything's falling apart. Half the servers are throwing errors. Even Marla from HR. Gerald screaming. Owen sweating. Tessa crying. Tessa crying. The same Tessa who'd squealed with delight over her unearned BMW and undeserved promotion was now crying because Daddy's empire was crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. The same Tessa who'd texted me to lighten up about her family's little joke was probably realizing that jokes have consequences when you're dealing with someone who knows where all the digital bodies are buried. The news switched to footage of ArcVantage Labs, and there was Miguel looking calm and professional in his navy blue suit, standing next to a banner that read, "Innovation through Partnership." The reporter was asking him about his company's strategic acquisition of critical compliance technology, and Miguel was giving all the right answers about excited to serve federal clients and committed to the highest security standards. Everything Whitmore had failed to do, everything Gerald had been too arrogant to prioritize, everything they'd assumed would just keep working because it always had, Miguel was promising to do it right. With my technology, with my patents, with my expertise, properly valued and legally protected. The partnership with Northstar Relay represents a significant expansion of ArcVantage's federal compliance capabilities, Miguel was saying, and I could see him fighting to keep a straight face. We'd practiced this interview 3 times, and every run-through had ended with both of us cracking up like teenagers pulling off the perfect prank. Except this wasn't a prank. This was business. This was what happened when you treated innovation like inheritance and assumed that smart people would always be grateful for whatever scraps you threw them. This was what happened when you confused loyalty with stupidity and thought public humiliation was an appropriate management technique. The segment ended with stock footage of federal buildings and serious voice narration about increasing scrutiny of government contractors and the importance of corporate governance in sensitive industries. Translation: Gerald's about to become very popular with regulatory agencies, and not in a good way. I poured another cup of terrible coffee and checked the market futures. Whitmore Dynamics was down 18% in pre-market trading, with more bad news probably on the way once word got out about the full scope of their technical difficulties. ArcVantage, meanwhile, was up 6% on news of their federal contract expansion. My phone buzzed with one more message, this one from Sophia. What did you do? What did I do? Oh, honey, that was the wrong question. The right question was, what took me so long to do it? I stared at her message for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard while I composed and deleted about 15 different responses. Everything from detailed explanations of intellectual property law to simple statements of fact about who actually built what. In the end, I went with something that captured exactly how I felt about 7 years of being taken for granted while she shopped for furniture with money I'd earned and she'd never respected. I stopped letting people laugh while standing on my work. Send. Then I turned off my phone, cranked up the TV volume, and settled in to watch Gerald Whitmore learn the most expensive lesson of his privileged life. The coffee was still terrible, the motel room still smelled like industrial despair, and my marriage was probably over. But for the first time in years, I felt like the person I used to be before I'd started apologizing for being good at my job. And that, as they say in the business world, was priceless. Here's the beautiful thing about corporate meltdowns. You don't need to be in the room to know exactly what's happening. Panic has its own language, and when a company's entire technical infrastructure disappears overnight, that language becomes very fucking loud very fucking fast. I was sitting in a Denny's at 9 a.m., working through a stack of pancakes that tasted like cardboard soaked in corn syrup, when the first wave of intelligence started rolling in. Marla Knox from HR, the same woman who'd pretended not to see me at the party, was suddenly my new best friend via text message. Gerald screaming at IT. Owen sweating through his shirt. Tessa locked in her office crying. Emergency board meeting started 20 minutes ago. Screaming at IT. Of course he was. Because when your entire business model evaporates overnight, the natural response is to yell at the 22-year-old help desk guy like it's his fault that daddy's golden goose just flew the coop. I could picture Gerald red-faced and spittle flying, demanding to know why our systems weren't working, completely oblivious to the fact that they'd never actually been his systems in the first place. My phone buzzed again, this time from Gene Park, the floor manager who'd actually understood what I did for a living instead of just nodding politely during technical presentations. Boss man, they're dead in the water. Federal audit portal won't even load. Compliance dashboard showing nothing but error messages. Gerald just asked IT if they tried turning it off and on again. Turning it off and on again. Jesus Christ. 7 years of building enterprise-grade infrastructure, and Gerald thought the solution was the same tech support advice your grandmother gets when her email stops working. The man who'd been bragging about family excellence and innovative leadership was now troubleshooting like a suburban dad trying to fix his Wi-Fi. But wait, it got better. The federal contract. The one Gerald loved to mention in every investor call. the one that was supposed to prove Whitmore could handle government-level security requirements, was now at risk because they couldn't self-certify their compliance systems. Because those systems were mine. Because those systems were now licensed exclusively to ArcVantage. Because Gerald had been so busy planning his Christmas party humiliation theater that he'd forgotten to read the fine print on who actually owned what. Bloomberg was running a breaking news ticker at the bottom of the diner's TV. Whitmore Dynamics trading halted pending SEC review of financial irregularities. The SEC. Harper Quinn had really delivered on her promise to make Owen's life interesting. I watched the business anchor explain how federal investigators were examining a pattern of questionable expense reports and vendor relationships, while showing file footage of Owen at some industry conference, looking smug in his $1,000 suit. That same suit was probably soaked with flop sweat right about now. My phone rang, Gerald's number flashing on the screen like a distress signal from a sinking ship. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to him try to sound calm and reasonable while his world burned down around him. Look, son, I think we may have had some miscommunication last night. Why don't you come in so we can sort this out like family? Family. The magic word that was supposed to make me forget about public humiliation and focus on being grateful for the privilege of working for people who thought my value could be summed up on a novelty t-shirt. ArcVantage went live on Bloomberg 20 minutes later. Miguel looked calm and professional as he explained their exciting new partnership with innovative technology firm Northstar Relay. The anchor kept saying my name, my actual name, not Gerald's son-in-law or the guy from IT, and treating me like someone whose opinion mattered, which was a refreshing change of pace. The best part was watching Gerald's empire crumble in real time. No dramatic explosions, no movie-style confrontations. Just quiet system failures and regulatory inquiries, and the steady drip, drip, drip of consequences finally catching up with people who'd thought they were untouchable. Sophia finally texted around noon. What did you do? What did I do? Oh, sweetie, that was adorable. Like I was some kind of criminal mastermind instead of just a guy who'd finally stopped letting people steal his work while laughing about it. Like protecting intellectual property that was legally mine was somehow a betrayal instead of basic self-respect. I stared at her message for about 10 minutes, typing and deleting responses while my pancakes got cold. Everything from detailed explanations of patent law to simple statements about what happens when you treat talent like it's disposable. In the end, I went with the truth, because sometimes the truth is the sharpest weapon you can use. I stopped letting people laugh while standing on my work. Send. Gerald's call came at exactly noon, because apparently even in the middle of a corporate meltdown, the man still believed in power lunch timing. His voice had that dangerous quiet quality that rich people use when they're trying not to scream at the help in public, controlled, measured, and absolutely seething underneath. You come here now, he said, not bothering with pleasantries or even basic human decency. Just a command from the lord of the manor to his rebellious peasant, because Gerald Whitmore didn't make requests. He gave orders and expected them to be followed by people who knew their place in his carefully constructed hierarchy. No, I said, and the silence that followed was so complete I could practically hear his brain short-circuiting. But I'll meet you in the lobby in an hour. Bring your lawyer. I hung up before he could respond, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to play by someone else's rules. Gerald was used to people jumping when he called, scrambling to fix his problems while he took credit for their solutions. Well, surprise, Gerald, your favorite fixer just became your biggest problem. The lobby of Whitmore Dynamics was all marble and glass and aggressive corporate masculinity, designed to intimidate visitors and remind employees exactly who signed their paychecks. Under normal circumstances, I would have felt small walking into that temple of inherited wealth and purchased power. Today, I felt like David walking into Goliath's neighborhood with a slingshot and absolutely nothing left to lose. Priya Desai arrived 10 minutes before me, looking like the kind of lawyer who charged $400 an hour and earned every penny through pure competence and calculated ruthlessness. She carried a slim folder that contained enough legal documentation to end Gerald's career and probably his legacy, all organized with the precision of someone who'd built her reputation on making powerful men very uncomfortable. Gerald showed up with his own legal team, Three guys in identical suits who looked like they'd been cloned in some corporate law laboratory. Behind them shuffled Owen Pike, looking like a man who'd spent the morning getting acquainted with federal investigators and their very pointed questions about creative accounting practices. Bringing Owen was a tactical error, but Gerald had always confused intimidation with strategy. "This is what's going to happen," Gerald started, trying to project the same authority that worked on board members and government contractors. "You're going to undo whatever technical tantrum you threw last night. We're going to pretend this never happened, and maybe, we'll discuss bringing you back at a reduced salary." A reduced salary? This fucking guy. His entire company was circling the drain. Federal investigators were probably setting up camp in his CFO's office, and he was still trying to negotiate from a position of strength he didn't have. "Counteroffer," I said, opening Priya's folder and laying out the documents like I was dealing cards in a poker game where I held all the aces. "You acknowledge that I own the patents for every piece of technology keeping your company operational. You admit that you've been in breach of licensing agreements for 6 months. And you stop pretending this is about family loyalty instead of corporate theft. Patent applications, license agreements, payment default notices, security breach reports that I'd been filing for months while they ignored every recommendation, cease and desist orders that had already been served. The paper trail was so complete it could have been used as evidence in business school about how not to manage intellectual property." Gerald's face went through about 15 different colors before settling on a shade of pale that matched the marble floors where his employees had laughed at my humiliation just 12 hours earlier. That's when Tessa stumbled in, mascara smudged like she'd been crying for hours, looking like a kid who'd just learned that actions have consequences. "Can't you just make this go away?" she pleaded, and the desperation in her voice was almost enough to make me feel sorry for her. "Almost. Make what go away, Tessa? The patents I filed legally? The contracts your father breached? The federal investigation into your CFO's creative bookkeeping? Or just the fact that your family thought you could humiliate me and I'd keep building your empire for free?" Sophia appeared behind them like a ghost at her own funeral, still wearing that silver dress from the party because apparently crisis management didn't require a costume change. Her arms were folded across her chest in that defensive posture she used when she knew she was wrong, but wasn't ready to admit it. "We're family." Gerald tried one more time, like magic words that would undo 18 months of careful legal preparation. "No," I said, standing up from the marble bench where they'd probably imagined I'd beg for forgiveness. "We're not. Family doesn't hand out unemployment notices as party favors. Family doesn't laugh while you destroy someone's career for entertainment." In the glass reflection of the lobby windows, I could see myself, tired, yes, but finally standing straight instead of hunched over in apology for existing. Finally looking like someone who knew his own worth instead of accepting whatever value other people assigned to him. "You don't get to hold the ladder and mock the person on it," I told them, gathering Priya's documents while Gerald's lawyers whispered frantically in his ear about liability and damages and all the expensive consequences of treating employees like disposable assets. "Not anymore." I walked toward the exit while they stood there in their expensive clothes and inherited power, finally understanding that some bridges can't be rebuilt after you've burned them yourself. ArcVantage Labs turned out to be everything Whitmore Dynamics pretended to be. Actual innovation instead of inherited mediocrity, real teamwork instead of nepotistic circle jerks, and leadership that understood the difference between taking credit and earning it. Miguel gave me a corner office with windows that actually opened, a development team that didn't need their hands held every 5 minutes, and the kind of budget that made Whitmore's penny pinching look like exactly what it was. Rich people being cheap with other people's talent. The lab itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Clean workstations, state-of-the-art hardware, and coffee that didn't taste like it had been filtered through someone's gym socks. No fake snow machines or crystal chandeliers or motivational posters about synergy. Just smart people doing smart work and getting paid what they were actually worth. My first hire was Gene Park, because loyalty deserves to be rewarded when it goes both directions. I offered him a signing bonus that was more than Whitmore had given him in annual raises over 3 years, plus equity in the projects he'd actually be building instead of just maintaining. Gene took one look at the offer sheet and started laughing. The good kind of laughter, not the cruel kind I'd been subjected to at Gerald's party. You know they're calling you Lucifer over there? Gene told me during his first week, setting up his workstation with the kind of care that comes from finally having tools that match your skill level. Marla from HR keeps talking about how you betrayed the family trust. Family trust. Right. Because trusting your family not to publicly humiliate you was apparently too much to ask, but expecting you to keep building their empire after they treated you like garbage was just natural family dynamics. We started a helpline for smaller vendors who'd been getting squeezed by Owen's kickback schemes. Companies that had been forced to choose between paying bribes disguised as marketing fees or losing their Whitmore contracts entirely. Turned out there were a lot of them, and they all had stories about Owen's creative interpretation of ethical business practices. My apartment above Rossetti's cafe was nothing fancy. One bedroom, a kitchen the size of a closet, and a view of the alley where they kept the dumpsters. But it was mine, paid for with clean money, and the old Italian couple who ran the cafe downstairs made the kind of coffee that actually improved your day instead of just keeping you awake. Mrs. Rossetti had adopted me like a stray cat, bringing up leftover cannoli and asking why a nice young man like me was living alone instead of with that pretty wife from the pictures. I stopped showing her pictures of Sophia after the divorce papers were filed. Harper Quinn won a state journalism award for her series on Whitmore's financial irregularities. The ceremony was covered on local news, and I watched from my little apartment while eating takeout Chinese and feeling genuinely proud of someone else's success for the first time in years. She'd taken my documentation and turned it into the kind of investigative masterpiece that actually changed things. Owen was facing federal charges, Gerald was dealing with shareholder lawsuits, and Whitmore Dynamics was hemorrhaging clients faster than a punctured pipeline. Late at night, I'd tape Gerald's $2 bill above my desk, not as a reminder of being hurt, but as a measuring stick. Never again would I accept less than my actual value. Never again would I build someone else's empire while they handed out BMWs to unqualified family members and unemployment notices to the people who actually did the work. Priya introduced me to a pro bono clinic downtown where small business founders came for help protecting their intellectual property from exactly the kind of corporate theft I'd spent 7 years enabling. Twice a month, I'd volunteer to review contracts and patent filings, helping other people avoid the mistake I'd made of trusting family to treat you like family. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't personal. It's making sure the next guy doesn't get screwed the same way you did. 1 year later, I was hosting my own Christmas party in the ArcVantage lab, and holy shit, what a difference a year makes when you're surrounded by people who actually deserve to be there. Miguel brought his famous tamales, the ones his grandmother taught him to make before she died, not some catered nonsense from a company that charged by the fancy napkin. Gene had somehow managed to rig the coffee machine to dispense hot chocolate, because apparently being a networking genius also made you a beverage wizard. Priya showed up with a bottle of champagne that cost more than most people's car payments, and Harper Quinn brought her journalism award because she was proud of it and wanted to share the moment with people who'd helped make it possible. Even Mrs. Rossetti from downstairs had joined us, carrying a tray of her legendary cannoli and complaining in her thick Brooklyn accent about how we were all too skinny and needed to eat more. "You boys work too hard," she kept saying, forcing second helpings on everyone while the news played softly in the background. It was the kind of Christmas gathering that actually felt like celebration instead of corporate theater. Real laughter instead of the performative bullshit I'd endured at Whitmore's Crystal Palace. People who were there because they wanted to be, not because their paychecks depended on it. That's when the breaking news alert cut through our conversation like a knife through wrapping paper. Whitmore Dynamics to be acquired in distress sale following year-long compliance crisis and federal investigation. Stock down 73% from pre-crisis highs. The room went quiet except for the soft hum of servers and Miguel's barely suppressed snort of laughter. On screen, they were showing file footage of the Whitmore building, the same glass tower where I'd spent 7 years building other people's dreams while they planned my destruction. Catastrophic dependency on revoked intellectual property licenses, the anchor was saying, reading from notes like she was delivering someone's obituary. Regulatory penalties have frozen the company's federal contracting pipeline, while ongoing SEC investigations into financial irregularities have spooked investors and triggered multiple shareholder lawsuits. My phone buzzed with a group text to the old Whitmore family thread, the one I'd forgotten to leave because, honestly, I'd been too busy succeeding to remember they existed. Gerald had written, "Turn on the news." I pictured them sitting in that marble atrium where they'd laughed at my expense 12 months ago. The same floor that was probably now reflecting a row of gray faces as they watched their empire get sold off piece by piece to pay for Gerald's mistakes and Owen's legal fees. The same chandelier that had sparkled above their cruel laughter now lighting up their corporate funeral. Tessa was probably crying again. Real tears this time, not the fake drama she'd performed when her unearned promotion couldn't protect her from the consequences of treating people like entertainment. Sophia was probably wondering if she should have defended her husband instead of her family's money. But that ship had sailed the moment she chose to laugh instead of stand up. I looked at the tiny $2 bill in its frame on my desk. Gerald's joke gift that had become my favorite reminder of exactly how much I was worth to people who thought net worth was the only worth that mattered. That wrinkled piece of legal tinder had watched me build something real, something mine, something that nobody could take away with a gift bag and a smirk. Miguel raised his champagne glass in a toast that felt nothing like Owen Pike's mocking gesture from that awful night. "To building things that last," he said, and everyone clinked glasses while the TV droned on about distress sales and federal penalties and the spectacular fall of people who'd confused inheritance with intelligence. Harper was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "You know what the best part is?" she said, gesturing at the screen where financial analysts were dissecting Whitmore's collapse with surgical precision. "They're using your patents as case studies in business schools now. How to protect intellectual property in corporate partnerships. You're literally teaching the next generation how not to get screwed." Mrs. Rossetti patted my shoulder with flour-dusted hands and said something in Italian that I'm pretty sure translated to "good for you, kid." She'd never understood exactly what I did for a living, but she understood the difference between people who worked for what they had and people who just expected it to be handed to them. I didn't need their applause anymore. Didn't need Gerald's approval or Sophia's validation or Tessa's fake friendship. I had something better, a team that respected my work, a future I'd built with my own hands, and the satisfaction of knowing that they'd finally learned what value looks like. It just took destroying their lives to teach them the lesson. My wife told her friends I'm obsessed with her because I asked her not to flirt with guys at parties. Then she made out with her ex right in front of me, as a joke, while her friends filmed and chanted he deserved it. When I walked out, she posted stories dancing on random guys with captions like, "This is what happens when you try to control me," then showed up wasted at 3 a.m. saying, "Every girl cheats. At least I did it to your face." Today at noon, my phone exploded with 20-plus panicked voice messages from her. "Don't do this. Please, answer me." You know that moment when your gut starts screaming at you, but your brain keeps telling it to shut the hell up? Yeah, that was me in September. My wife Marissa had perfected this neat little trick where every legitimate concern I had about our relationship magically transformed into comedy gold for her girlfriends. It was like watching a magician, except instead of pulling rabbits out of hats, she was pulling jokes out of my genuine worries about us. It started small, the way cancer does. I'd ask her not to flirt with random dudes at parties. You know, basic married person etiquette, and she'd tilt her head with this patronizing little smile. "Babe, you're being ridiculous," she'd say, like I'd just suggested we start keeping pet dinosaurs. Then came the phone calls to her inner circle, Tina, Grace, and Leah. The holy trinity of enabling bullshit. "Oh my God, girls, you won't believe what he said now." I'd hear her whisper into her phone, usually while I was in the next room trying to pretend I wasn't listening. "He thinks I was flirting with the bartender. Can you believe it? I literally just said thank you when the guy complimented my dress." Right. Because accepting compliments from strange men while batting your eyelashes is totally normal married behavior. But what do I know? I'm just the obsessed husband, apparently. The whispers started following me everywhere. At dinner parties, I'd catch snippets of conversation that would make my stomach drop. "Clingy much?" Grace would snort, loud enough for me to hear. "Poor Marissa, having to deal with that level of jealousy," Tina would add, shaking her head like she was discussing a terminal illness. Leah was the worst, though. She had this way of looking at me like I was a wounded animal at the zoo, all pity and disgust rolled into one nauseating expression. "You know, Some men are just naturally insecure, she'd say to Marissa. Again, just loud enough for me to catch it. It's not their fault they can't handle strong, independent women. Strong and independent. That's what they called it when your wife I fucked the waiter right in front of you. At first, I tried to convince myself I was losing my mind. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was one of those psycho husbands you see in movies who checks their wife's phone and follows them to work. The thought made me sick, so I'd swallow my concerns and pretend everything was fine. After all, if 3 of her closest friends thought I was being unreasonable, maybe I was the problem. But here's the thing about gaslighting. It only works if you let it. And somewhere between the 5th, you're being dramatic, and the 10th eye roll when I brought up her behavior, I started keeping mental notes. Not in a creepy way, just observational. Like a scientist studying a particularly toxic species of snake. The pattern became crystal clear. Every time I'd voice a legitimate concern about boundaries or respect, Marissa would flip the script faster than a politician during election season. Suddenly, I wasn't a husband asking for basic courtesy. I was an obsessed, controlling maniac who couldn't handle his wife having friends. He follows me around the house, she'd joke to her friends during their weekly wine nights. I could hear them cackling from the kitchen while I was literally just getting a glass of water. I can't even go to the bathroom without him asking where I'm going. Newsflash, honey. Asking, where are you headed? When someone grabs their purse and heads for the door isn't stalking. It's called basic human communication. You know, that thing normal couples do. My coworker Aaron tried to warn me about 3 months into this nightmare. We were grabbing lunch at this dingy sandwich shop near the office, and I must have looked like I'd been hit by a truck because he put down his pastrami and gave me this look. Dude, you look like hell, he said, not bothering to sugarcoat it. Aaron was one of those straight shooter types who'd tell you if your breath smelled like a garbage disposal. What's going on? I found myself spilling the whole mess. The parties, the flirting, the constant accusations that I was being paranoid. Aaron listened without interrupting, which should have been my first clue that this conversation was going to end with some hard truths. Man, he said when I finished, shaking his head. Don't ignore red flags just because you love her. At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. Love conquers all, right? That's what the movies tell you. What they don't mention is that love also makes you blind, deaf, and dumb to obvious warning signs that your partner is slowly eroding your sanity one joke at a time. The worst part wasn't even the flirting or the boundary crossing. It was the way she'd made me question my own reality. I'd catch her texting someone at midnight, phone tilted away from me, and when I'd ask about it, she'd laugh. There goes my paranoid husband again. Can't a girl have private conversations? Sure, she could. But when those private conversations happened daily, usually with guys I didn't know, and always with that secretive little smirk on her face, forgive me for thinking something was fishy. The final straw in September came at Tina's housewarming party. I watched Marissa collect phone numbers from 3 different guys, each time with this elaborate performance about how networking was important for her career. Right, because exchanging contacts with Brad the bartender was definitely going to advance her marketing career. When I suggested maybe we could head home, it was past midnight and I had work the next day. She practically rolled her eyes into orbit. See what I mean? She announced to the group. Obsessed with controlling my social life. The crowd ate it up. A few guys actually laughed and patted me on the shoulder like I was some kind of joke. Let the lady have fun, man, one of them said. You've got to trust your wife. Trust. That word had become a weapon in her arsenal. Anytime I questioned anything, it wasn't about respect or boundaries. It was about trust. And apparently, I didn't have enough of it. That night, driving home in dead silence, I finally understood what Aaron meant. These weren't red flags anymore. They were giant crimson billboards with flashing neon lights spelling out danger in letters visible from space. But I was too busy trying to be the perfect, understanding husband to pay attention to the obvious. The obsessed husband joke had become her get-out-of-jail-free card for any behavior that crossed the line. Flirting with strangers? I was obsessed. Setting boundaries? I was controlling. Asking for basic respect? I was insecure. It was genius, really. She'd created this perfect little ecosystem where she could do whatever she wanted, and any objection from me just proved her point about how unreasonable I was. Her friends reinforced it, her family believed it, and even some of my own friends started giving me those concerned looks that said, maybe you should chill out, man. But here's what nobody tells you about being slowly driven insane by someone who's supposed to love you. There comes a moment when the fog lifts, just for a second, and you see the situation with brutal clarity. For me, that moment came when I realized I'd started apologizing for having feelings about my wife's behavior. Sorry I got upset when you gave that guy your number. Sorry I'm not comfortable with you staying out until 3 a.m. without telling me where you are. Sorry for being such an obsessed, controlling husband. That's when it hit me. I wasn't obsessed with her. I was obsessed with trying to save a marriage that she'd already checked out of. And while I was busy playing the part of the understanding husband, she was busy playing the part of the victim married to a psycho. September ended with me staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., listening to her peaceful breathing next to me, wondering when exactly I'd become the villain in my own love story. Erin's words kept echoing in my head. Don't ignore red flags just because you love her. Well, guess what? I was done ignoring them. Time to start paying attention to what was right in front of me, even if it was going to hurt like hell. Derek's birthday party was supposed to be fun. You know, one of those chill house parties where you drink cheap beer, complain about work, and pretend you're still in your 20s even though your back hurts from sleeping wrong. Instead, it turned into the kind of nightmare that makes you question every life choice you've ever made, starting with saying, I do, to someone who apparently missed the memo about what marriage means. The house was packed tighter than a subway car during rush hour. Derek had invited half the city, and the other half had showed up uninvited. Music was thumping so loud I could feel it in my chest, and the smell of cheap cologne mixed with cheaper beer filled the air. Classic house party vibes, except for the part where my wife was about to publicly destroy our marriage for entertainment. Marissa looked incredible, of course. She'd spent 2 hours getting ready, which should have been my first warning sign since Derek's idea of formal attire was a clean t-shirt. She was wearing this little black dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't proud walking in with her on my arm. For about 5 minutes, I actually thought we might have a good time. Then Logan walked in. Logan fucking Mitchell. Her ex-boyfriend from college, the guy she dated for 2 years before we met. The same Logan she'd sworn was ancient history and totally irrelevant to our relationship. Yet somehow, this irrelevant piece of ancient history had managed to score an invite to Derek's party, and judging by the way Marissa's entire posture changed when he walked through the door, she'd known he'd be there. Oh wow, Logan's here, she said, and I swear to God, her voice went up like 3 octaves. Like she was genuinely shocked to see him, as if Derek hadn't probably texted her the guest list a week ago. Yeah, what a coincidence, I muttered, grabbing a beer from the cooler and trying to ignore the way she was already scanning the room for him. Within 10 minutes, she'd found an excuse to drift in his direction. I should say hi, she announced. It would be rude not to, right? Right. Because rudeness was suddenly a huge concern for the woman who'd spent the last month telling our friends I was obsessed with her. I tried to play it cool, I really did. I hung out by the beer pong table, made small talk with some of Derek's work buddies, even laughed at a few genuinely terrible jokes. But I couldn't help watching her out of the corner of my eye. And what I saw made my stomach turn. She wasn't just saying hi. She was performing, touching his arm when she laughed, leaning in way too close when he talked, playing with her hair in that way she used to do when we were first dating. Every gesture was calculated, deliberate, and designed to send a message. The question was, who was the message for? Dude, you okay? Some guy named Mike had sidled up next to me, following my gaze across the room. You look like you're about to murder someone. Just peachy, I said, taking a long pull from my beer. Nothing like watching your wife flirt with her ex at a party. Mike winced. Ouch. That's rough, man. Meanwhile, Tina, Grace, and Leah had materialized around Marissa like her personal hype squad. They were giggling and whispering, occasionally shooting glances in my direction. I could practically hear their conversation. Look at him. So jealous. Marissa deserves better. She should totally make him sweat. And then she started touching him. Not accidentally, not casually. Deliberately. Her hand slid down his arm when she laughed at something he said. She pressed against him when someone squeezed past them in the crowded room. Every movement was a declaration of war, and she kept looking at me to make sure I was watching. I was watching, all right. I was watching my wife systematically disrespect our marriage in front of a room full of people, many of whom I'd have to face at future social events. I was watching her turn our relationship into entertainment for her friends. I was watching the woman I'd promised to love and honor treat me like a joke. The crowd around them was getting bigger. Someone had turned the music down slightly, and I could hear them laughing. Derek raised his beer and shouted something about old friends reuniting, which got a cheer from the group. Marissa was eating up the attention, her face flushed with alcohol and the thrill of having an audience. That's when she looked directly at me across the room. Not a glance, not a quick peek, a full-on stare. She held my gaze for what felt like forever, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. This wasn't about Logan. This wasn't about having fun. This was about power. This was about proving she could do whatever she wanted, and I'd just have to take it. She smiled. Actually smiled at me while her hand was still on Logan's chest. And then she kissed him. Not a quick peck, not an accidental brush of lips. A full, deep, passionate kiss that went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 seconds. 10 seconds that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. 10 seconds that turned me into that guy. The one everyone pities at parties. The one whose wife makes out with other men while he stands there like an idiot. The reaction was immediate. Grace whipped out her phone and started filming. Tina was clapping like she was at a goddamn Broadway show. Leah cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted, "He deserved it," like Marissa had just scored the winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. The crowd erupted. Some people were laughing, others were cheering, and a few looked genuinely uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Because why would they? This was premium drama, the kind of shit people would be talking about for months. Remember Derek's party when Marissa totally destroyed her husband? Epic. I stood there frozen, beer still in my hand, watching my wife pull away from Logan with the biggest smile I'd seen on her face in months. She looked triumphant, vindicated, like she'd just proven some important point about female empowerment or standing up to controlling men. The humiliation hit me like a physical force. It started in my chest and radiated outward until my entire body felt like it was on fire. Every person in that room was looking at me, waiting to see how I'd react. Would I make a scene? Would I storm over there and drag her away? Would I punch Logan in his smug face? Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I set down my beer, walked to the front door, and left. No dramatic exit speech, no confrontation, no begging. I just left. The walk to my car felt like a death march. Each step was heavier than the last, and I could hear the party continuing behind me like nothing had happened. Like my marriage hadn't just been publicly executed for everyone's entertainment. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone was already buzzing. Text after text, all from Marissa. "Where did you go? Don't be dramatic. Come back inside. You're embarrassing me. It was just a kiss. Stop overreacting. Just a kiss. Right." Because tongue wrestling your ex-boyfriend at a party while your husband watches is totally normal behavior that I was overreacting to. Then came the phone calls. Ring after ring after ring. I let them all go to voicemail while I sat in my car, staring at the house where my wife was probably explaining to everyone how I was too insecure to handle her friendship with Logan. The final text came 20 minutes later. "Fine. Be childish. But don't expect me to apologize for living my life." Living her life. That's what she called making out with her ex-boyfriend in front of a room full of people. Living her best life, I guess. I drove home in complete silence, my mind replaying the entire scene on an endless loop. The way she'd looked at me before she kissed him. The sound of her friends cheering. The feeling of standing there like a complete fool while my wife publicly humiliated me. But the worst part? The absolute worst fucking part was knowing that when I got home and tried to explain how I felt, she'd find a way to make it my fault. She'd tell me I was being dramatic, that I was reading too much into things, that I was the one with the problem for not being cool with my wife kissing other men. And her friends would back her up, because that's what they did. They enabled her worst behavior and painted me as the villain for not being okay with it. As I pulled into our driveway, I realized Aaron had been right about the red flags. They weren't subtle hints or minor concerns anymore. They were giant, flashing warning signs. And I'd been ignoring them because I didn't want to face the truth about what my marriage had become. The truth was simple and devastating. My wife didn't respect me. Worse than that, she actively enjoyed disrespecting me in front of other people. And the scariest part? I'd been letting her do it for months, convinced that being a good husband meant taking whatever she dished out with a smile. Well, guess what? The smile was officially gone. You'd think humiliating your husband in front of 30 people would be enough for one night. But apparently Marissa was just getting warmed up, because while I was sitting at home, staring at the ceiling and wondering what the hell had happened to my marriage, she was busy documenting her liberation for the entire internet to see. The first Instagram story notification hit my phone around 11 p.m. I almost ignored it. Honestly, I was emotionally drained and just wanted to pretend the whole night hadn't happened. But curiosity is a bitch, and masochism runs deep, so I opened it. There she was, dancing with some random guy I'd never seen before. Not just dancing, grinding. His hands were on her waist, she was pressed up against him, and the caption read, "Finally dancing with someone who knows how to have fun." Woman dancing sparkles. The dig was subtle but crystal clear. Someone who knows how to have fun, as opposed to her uptight, obsessed husband who couldn't handle watching his wife make out with her ex. I screenshot it before it disappeared, my hands actually shaking. Not from anger. Well, not just anger, but from this sick combination of betrayal and disbelief. This was my wife. The woman who'd promised to love and cherish me. The woman who, just 6 hours ago, had kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me before we left for the party. Story number 2 dropped 15 minutes later. Another guy, another dance, another caption designed to twist the knife. This is what happens when you try to control me. Face with rolling eyes. Control her. Right. Because asking your spouse not to tongue wrestle their ex at parties is basically domestic tyranny. By midnight, she'd posted 7 stories. 7. Each one more deliberately hurtful than the last. There was one of her doing shots with a group of guys I didn't recognize, captioned, "New friends who don't come with baggage." Another showed her on some dude's lap during what looked like a game of truth or dare, with the caption, "Freedom feels so good." But the 8th story, that was the one that made me want to put my fist through the wall. It was a video of her making out with not one, but 2 different guys at the party. The caption read, "Single life hits different kiss mark," and she'd tagged Tina, Grace, and Leah in every single fucking story. Single life. We were still married. I was sitting in our house, looking at our wedding photos on the mantle, and she was telling the internet she was single. My phone buzzed with notifications. Comments, likes, heart eye emojis from her friends. YSSS Queen, from Grace. Get it girl, from Tina. About time, from Leah. Even people I barely knew were commenting. Egging her on like this was some kind of empowerment moment instead of a married woman publicly destroying her husband. I kept screenshotting everything, partly for evidence and partly because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Each story felt like a punch to the gut, but I couldn't stop watching. It was like passing a car accident, horrifying but impossible to look away from. Around 1 a.m., she posted what I thought would be the final story. A group selfie with about 6 guys, everyone holding drinks, everyone laughing. The caption, "Why settle for one when you can have them all?" Smiling face with horns. That one made me physically nauseous. I actually had to put my phone down and take deep breaths to keep from throwing up. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was cruelty. This was my wife, the person who was supposed to have my back, publicly humiliating me for sport. But wait, there's more. Because at 2:30 a.m., like some kind of sadistic infomercial, she dropped the grand finale. A video of her slow dancing with Logan, her head on his shoulder, looking more content than I'd seen her look with me in months. The caption was simple, "Some people just get you." And there it was. The final nail in the coffin of our marriage, delivered via Instagram story for maximum impact. I must have watched that last video 50 times, looking for some sign that this was all just alcohol-fueled stupidity. Some indication that she'd regret it in the morning. But the way she looked at him, the way she melted into his arms, that wasn't drunk behavior. That was someone who'd found exactly what she'd been looking for. At 3 a.m., I heard her car in the driveway. I was still on the couch, still holding my phone, still processing the digital devastation she'd unleashed. Part of me wanted to pretend to be asleep, to avoid the conversation I knew was coming. But a bigger part of me, the part that was apparently a glutton for punishment, wanted to see how she'd try to spin this. The front door opened, and she stumbled in, clearly wasted. Her hair was a mess, her makeup was smudged, and she reeked of cigarettes and some cologne that definitely wasn't mine. She looked like she'd been through a hurricane, but she was smiling. Actually fucking smiling. "Hey babe," she slurred, leaning against the doorframe like she was posing for another Instagram story. You're still up. Hard to sleep when your wife is posting softcore porn on social media, I said, holding up my phone to show her the screenshots. She squinted at the screen, then laughed. Not a nervous laugh or an embarrassed laugh. A genuine, amused laugh like I'd just told her a really good joke. Oh, those, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Come on, don't be so uptight. It was just a party. Just a party. Right. And the Titanic was just a boat ride. You made out with Logan, I said, my voice eerily calm considering the rage building in my chest. On camera. And posted it online. She shrugged, actually fucking shrugged, and kicked off her heels. So? We're not together anymore. It's not like it means anything. We're married, Marissa. Yeah. And you left me at the party like a child? She shot back, her tone shifting from drunk and playful to sharp and defensive. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. The audacity was breathtaking. I'd embarrassed her by leaving after watching her tongue wrestle her ex-boyfriend. But her making out with multiple men and posting it online was just harmless fun. You told the internet you were single. I continued, scrolling through the screenshots. You literally captioned a video, single life, hits different. She stumbled over to the couch and collapsed next to me, close enough that I could smell the alcohol on her breath mixed with that unfamiliar cologne. Baby, you're being way too serious about this, she said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. It's just social media. Nobody takes that stuff seriously. Nobody except the hundreds of people who'd seen it, including our friends, family members, and coworkers who followed her account. Every girl cheats, she said suddenly, her voice matter-of-fact like she was discussing the weather. At least I did it to your face. The words hit me like a physical blow. Every girl cheats. Like it was some universal truth, some biological imperative that I was too naive to understand. And she was proud of her honesty, proud that she'd humiliated me publicly instead of doing it behind my back. That's what makes me a good wife, she continued, leaning her head back against the couch cushion. I don't sneak around. I don't lie. I show you exactly who I am. She was right about that last part. She was showing me exactly who she was. Someone who thought marriage vows were suggestions, someone who believed respect was optional, someone who got off on causing me pain. You're drunk, I said, standing up and putting distance between us. We'll talk about this tomorrow. No, we won't, she said, her eyes still closed but her voice sharp. Because tomorrow you'll apologize for being dramatic, and I'll forgive you for embarrassing me at Derek's party, and we'll go back to normal. That's how this works. That's how this works. Like our marriage was some kind of scripted drama where I played the apologetic husband and she played the misunderstood wife. Like my feelings were just props in her performance. She struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. You know what your problem is? She said, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. You take everything so seriously. It was just kissing. It was just dancing. It was just having fun. You act like I committed murder. Just kissing. Just dancing. Just having fun. Just destroying our marriage one Instagram story at a time. I'm going to bed, I said, heading toward the stairs. Good, she called after me. Maybe sleeping alone will help you remember what you're fighting for. I stopped halfway up the stairs and turned back to look at her. She was slumped on the couch, scrolling through her phone, probably reading all the comments and likes on her stories. She looked satisfied, accomplished, like she'd just had the best night of her life. That's when it hit me. She wasn't drunk rambling or saying things she didn't mean. She was telling me the truth. This was who she really was when she thought she could get away with it. This was my wife without the mask. Every girl cheats. The words echoed in my head as I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling. She hadn't just kissed Logan. She'd kissed multiple guys, danced with strangers, and broadcast it all like it was some kind of victory lap. And in her mind, I was the problem for not being okay with it. I grabbed my phone and looked at the stories one more time before they expired. Each one was a little piece of our marriage dying in real time, documented and celebrated for posterity. Tomorrow, they'd be gone from her profile, but the screenshots would remain. Evidence of the night my wife showed me exactly how little our marriage meant to her. The worst part wasn't even the cheating or the public humiliation. It was the realization that this had been building for months, maybe longer. All those times she'd called me obsessed or controlling, all those whispered conversations with her friends. This was what she'd been working toward. The freedom to do whatever she wanted without consequences. Well, congratulations, Marissa. Mission fucking accomplished. You know what's funny about hitting rock bottom? The view is actually pretty clear from down there. All the bullshit that seemed complicated before suddenly becomes simple. All the excuses you made for someone's behavior stop making sense. And all the power they thought they had over you just evaporates. That's where I found myself Saturday morning, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, staring at my phone like it was a loaded weapon. For months, maybe years, I'd been playing Marissa's game by her rules. Every time she crossed a line, I'd react exactly how she expected. I'd get upset, we'd fight. I'd eventually apologize for being too sensitive, and she'd graciously forgive me for having feelings. Well, fuck that game. Time to change the rules. I turned my phone off. Not on silent. Not on do not disturb. Completely off. The sudden quiet was almost jarring after months of constant notifications, calls, and text battles. For the first time in forever, I could actually hear myself think without Marissa's voice drowning out my own thoughts. The plan was simple. Complete radio silence. No calls, no texts, no social media interactions, nothing. If Marissa wanted to act single, I'd let her experience what being single actually felt like. No husband to blame for her problems, no emotional punching bag to absorb her drama, no guaranteed audience for her victim performance. I tried everything else: reasoning, fighting, compromise, therapy suggestions. None of it worked because you can't reason with someone who doesn't want to be reasonable. You can't fix someone who doesn't think they're broken. But you can remove yourself from the equation entirely. Sunday came and went in blissful silence. I cleaned the house, watched football, ordered pizza, and did absolutely nothing that involved thinking about my wife or our train wreck of a marriage. It was the most peaceful day I'd had in months. Monday morning, I turned my phone back on just long enough to check work messages. 3 missed calls from Marissa, all from Sunday evening. No voicemails. Interesting. Usually she'd leave long, rambling messages about how I was being immature or dramatic. The fact that she hadn't left any told me she was starting to realize this wasn't business as usual. I turned the phone back off and went to work. Tuesday was when things got interesting. I could practically feel her confusion through the walls of our house as I got ready for work. She was awake. I could hear her moving around in the bedroom, but I didn't acknowledge her. Didn't say good morning, didn't ask about her hangover, didn't even look in her direction. I grabbed my coffee, my keys, and left like she was a piece of furniture. When I got to work, Aaron took one look at me and grinned. "You look different," he said. "Less like someone's been slowly murdering your soul." "Funny you should mention that," I said, settling into my desk chair with my first genuine smile in weeks. I think my soul might actually be growing back. By lunch, my phone, which I'd turned on to check work emails, showed 17 missed calls from Marissa. 17. That was more calls than she'd made to me in the previous month combined. Still no voicemails, but the text had started. "Why aren't you answering your phone? This is ridiculous. You're being childish. We need to talk like adults. Call me back now." Each text was progressively more desperate, and I could practically see her panic growing with every unanswered message. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't dancing to her tune, and she had no idea how to handle it. I deleted the texts without responding and turned the phone back off. Wednesday brought escalation. 23 missed calls. The texts had evolved from demanding to pleading. "Baby, please call me back. I know you're upset, but this silent treatment isn't solving anything. Can we please just talk? I miss you." Miss me? She missed having someone to blame for her problems. She missed having a guaranteed audience for her drama. She missed the power she'd held over me for months. But she didn't miss me. If she'd missed me, she wouldn't have spent Saturday night making out with half the party while posting it online for everyone to see. Thursday was my personal favorite. 31 missed calls and a text marathon that would have impressed a teenager. This is insane. You can't just ignore me forever. I was drunk. People do stupid things when they're drunk. Why are you being so dramatic about one stupid kiss? Logan means nothing to me. You're my husband. Act like it. Fine. Be a baby. See if I care. Wait, I didn't mean that. Please just call me. I'm sorry you got upset. That last one was my favorite. She was sorry I got upset. Not sorry for what she did. Not sorry for humiliating me. Not sorry for posting it online. Sorry that I had the audacity to have feelings about watching my wife cheat on me in public. Classic Marissa. Even her apologies were about my reactions, not her actions. Friday afternoon, my sister Clara called me at work. "What the hell is going on with you and Marissa?" she asked without preamble. She called Mom crying about how you're giving her the silent treatment over nothing. Ah, there it was. When the direct approach failed, Marissa had moved to phase 2, recruit family members to guilt me into submission. She kissed her ex-boyfriend at a party and posted videos of herself making out with random guys on Instagram. I said calmly, "How exactly is that nothing?" Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Jesus Christ. Are you serious?" "Dead serious. And she's calling it nothing?" Apparently, I'm being dramatic and controlling for not being thrilled about it. Clara let out a long breath. "You know, I never really liked her," she said. "But I figured that was just protective sister stuff. Now I'm thinking my instincts were spot on. It was funny how other people could see what I'd been blind to for months." Clara had always been polite to Marissa, but never warm, never enthusiastic about our relationship. I'd chalked it up to typical sister-in-law dynamics, but maybe she'd been seeing red flags I'd been too love-drunk to notice. "She doesn't fear losing you because you've never let her," Clara continued. "Every time she pulls this crap, you chase after her, apologize, try to fix things. She's learned that no matter how badly she treats you, you'll always come crawling back." The truth hurt, but it was the kind of pain that clarifies things. Like setting a broken bone, agonizing but necessary. "So what are you going to do?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "Absolutely nothing." And that's exactly what I did. Nothing. No calls, no texts, no attempts at reconciliation. I went to work, came home, made dinner for one, and lived my life like I was actually single instead of just pretending to be on social media. The missed calls kept coming, sometimes 20 a day. The texts grew increasingly frantic, cycling between anger and desperation like she was stuck in some kind of emotional washing machine. She'd go from, "You're being ridiculous," to "Please don't give up on us," within the span of an hour. By the following Tuesday, something had shifted. The texts weren't coming in angry bursts anymore. They were scattered throughout the day, each one more vulnerable than the last. "I can't eat. I can't sleep. Please just tell me you still love me. I don't understand what's happening." That last one almost made me laugh. She didn't understand what was happening. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't absorbing her bad behavior and apologizing for my reactions. For the first time, there were actual consequences for treating me like garbage. Of course, she didn't understand. This had never happened before. The really beautiful part was watching her scramble to regain control. She tried everything, sending her friends to text me, blocked, having her mom call, ignored, even showing up at places she thought I might be. But I was a ghost, completely unavailable for her usual manipulation tactics. My silence had become a mirror, reflecting her behavior back at her without my usual cushioning of explanations and forgiveness. And she didn't like what she saw. For years, I'd been her emotional shock absorber, soaking up all the impact of her selfish choices so she never had to feel the consequences. Every time she crossed a line, I'd been there to minimize the damage, make excuses, smooth things over. I'd trained her to believe that no matter what she did, I'd always be there to clean up the mess. Well, surprise. The cleanup crew had gone on strike indefinitely. Friday rolled around like a ticking time bomb, and I should have known Marissa wouldn't go quietly into that good night of being ignored. See, the thing about people who are used to getting their way is that when you stop playing their game, they don't just accept defeat, they escalate. They bring out the big guns. And in Marissa's case, the big guns apparently meant staging a public intervention at my workplace like some kind of deranged relationship terrorist. I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly reports when Aaron appeared at my cubicle looking like he'd just witnessed a car accident. His face was this perfect mixture of concern and barely contained amusement, which immediately put me on high alert. "Dude," he said, glancing around to make sure nobody else was listening. "Some lady's in the lobby making a scene. Security's trying to calm her down, but she's demanding to see you. Says she's your wife." My stomach dropped straight through the floor and into the building's foundation. Blonde, about 5'6", looks like she could murder someone with her eyeballs. "That's the one," Aaron confirmed. "She's got this whole, 'I'm a victim of domestic abuse' vibe going on, except instead of asking for help, She's demanding they produce you immediately, or she's calling corporate. Of course she was. Because when emotional manipulation fails, the next logical step is professional sabotage. I could practically picture her in the lobby, probably wearing something calculated to make her look vulnerable yet determined, telling everyone who'd listen about her poor husband who'd been acting strangely lately. Want me to tell security you're not available? Aaron offered. The temptation was real. I could hide in the office until she got tired and left, avoid the whole confrontation, and maintain my silent strategy. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe stupidity, maybe just exhaustion from running away, decided it was time to face the music. No, I said, standing up and straightening my tie. If she wants a showdown, she can have one. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like descending into hell, except hell probably had better mood lighting. When the doors opened, I could hear her before I could see her, that particular pitch of indignation that meant she was in full performance mode. There she was, center stage in our building's lobby, surrounded by confused security guards and a growing audience of my coworkers who'd come down for their lunch break. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a simple dress that screamed, responsible wife, minimal makeup to emphasize her distress, and body language that suggested she was barely holding herself together. The performance was masterful, really. She should have gone into theater. The second she spotted me, her entire demeanor shifted. The frantic energy evaporated, replaced by this calculated vulnerability that made my skin crawl. She approached me like I was a wild animal that might bolt at any second. "There you are," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear, but soft enough to sound concerned rather than accusatory. "I've been so worried about you." Worried, right. She'd been worried about losing control of the narrative, not worried about my well-being. "Marissa," I said evenly, very aware that half my office was now watching this unfold like it was better than cable TV. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," she said, stepping closer and lowering her voice to an intimate whisper that somehow managed to carry across the entire lobby. Like adults. This silent treatment is killing me. The audacity was breathtaking. After a week of completely ignoring my existence except to post revenge porn on Instagram, she was positioning herself as the mature one trying to fix our relationship. The woman who'd made out with her ex-boyfriend in front of 30 people was lecturing me about adult communication. "I'm at work," I pointed out, gesturing to the obvious office building around us. "This isn't the place for personal conversations." "Then where is?" she demanded. And there it was, a flash of the real Marissa underneath the concerned wife act. "You won't answer your phone, you won't come home, you won't talk to me." What choice did I have? Home. That was rich. I'd been living in our house all week while she stayed God knows where, probably with Tina, or at some guy's place she'd met at Derek's party. But sure, I was the one who wouldn't come home. My coworkers were pretending to mind their own business, but I could feel their attention like heat lamps. Sarah from accounting was openly staring while pretending to check her phone. Mike from IT had suddenly developed a fascination with the lobby's architectural details. Even building security looked invested in how this drama would unfold. "You want to talk like adults?" I said, matching her volume so everyone could hear. "Fine. Let's talk about Saturday night." Her face went pale. This wasn't part of her script. She'd come here expecting to paint me as the unreasonable husband who was punishing his innocent wife for no reason. She hadn't counted on me being willing to air our dirty laundry in front of my colleagues. We don't need to," she stammered, glancing around nervously at our growing audience. "No, let's do this," I continued, my voice getting stronger. "Let's talk about how you made out with your ex-boyfriend at a party. Let's talk about the Instagram stories where you grinded on random guys and told the internet you were single. Let's talk about coming home at 3 a.m. telling me every girl cheats, and I should be grateful you did it to my face." The lobby had gone dead silent. Even the security guards had stopped pretending they weren't listening. Marissa's carefully constructed victim narrative was crumbling in real time, and she knew it. "You're embarrassing me," she hissed, but her voice cracked on the last word. "I'm embarrassing you?" I let out a laugh that came out harsher than I intended. "Lady, you embarrassed yourself. I'm just providing context." She tried to recover, switching tactics like a politician caught in a scandal. "I was drunk," she said, her voice taking on that pleading tone she used when she wanted sympathy. "People do stupid things when they're drunk. You know I didn't mean any of it. Which part didn't you mean? I asked. The kissing? The dancing? The part where you told me every girl cheats? Or the part where you called our marriage a joke on social media? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She'd never had to defend her behavior in front of an audience before. Usually, our fights happened in private where she could manipulate the narrative and make me feel crazy for having reasonable expectations. We can fix this, she said desperately, reaching for my arm. We just need to communicate better. I know we can work through this if you just... No, I said, stepping back so she couldn't touch me. We're done. The words came out clearer and stronger than I'd expected. For months, I'd been afraid to say them, terrified of what my life would look like without her. But standing there in that lobby, surrounded by witnesses, I realized the life I'd been trying to save wasn't worth saving. Her face went through about 6 different emotions in rapid succession: shock, anger, disbelief, panic, and finally, desperation. You don't mean that, she said, but her voice was barely above a whisper now. I mean every word of it, I said. I'm done being your emotional punching bag. I'm done making excuses for your behavior. I'm done pretending that what you did was normal or acceptable or forgivable. The lobby was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was frozen, like they were afraid any movement would break the spell and interrupt the best drama they'd seen all year. But I love you, Marissa said, and for a split second, she almost sounded sincere. Almost. No, you don't, I replied. You love having someone to blame for your problems. You love having a husband you can disrespect without consequences. You love the safety net I provided while you acted single. But you don't love me. She started crying then. Real tears, not the calculated ones she usually deployed during arguments. But even as the waterworks started, I could see her scanning the crowd, calculating how this breakdown would play with our audience. Everyone makes mistakes, she sobbed, playing to the room now. Marriage is about forgiveness, about working through problems together. You're right, I said. Marriage is about working through problems together. It's also about respect, loyalty, and not making out with your ex-boyfriend at parties. Funny how you forgot those parts. The tears were flowing freely now, and I could see a few people in the crowd starting to look sympathetic. Marissa had always been good at playing the victim when cornered, and crying beautiful women tend to get the benefit of the doubt from strangers. But I was done caring about optics. I was done protecting her reputation at the expense of my sanity. I made one mistake, she pleaded. One stupid, drunk mistake. Please don't throw away 3 years of marriage over one night. One mistake. She was still trying to minimize it, still trying to rewrite history to make herself look better. The Instagram stories, the grinding, the multiple make-out sessions, all condensed into one mistake, like she'd accidentally ordered the wrong coffee. It wasn't one mistake, I said firmly. It was months of disrespect building up to one public humiliation. The kissing was just the grand finale. I turned to walk away, and she grabbed my arm. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. Not here. Not like this. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the triumphant smile on her face when she kissed Logan. I remembered her laughing as her friends filmed it. I remembered her telling me every girl cheats like it was some kind of universal truth I was too naive to understand. You did this, I said, gently but firmly removing her hand from my arm. Not here, not like this. You chose the when and where when you decided to destroy our marriage at a party. I'm just choosing not to pretend it didn't happen. And with that, I walked away. For the first time in our entire relationship, I walked away while she was still talking, while she was still crying, while she was still expecting me to cave and comfort her and apologize for my reaction to her betrayal. But I didn't look back. Not once. Saturday morning brought the kind of phone call that makes you want to throw your device into the nearest body of water. My phone buzzed at 8 a.m. sharp, because apparently destroying marriages is an early bird activity, and the caller ID showed Marissa's mom, Patricia. I should have let it go to voicemail, but curiosity killed the cat, and I was apparently the cat in this scenario. Hello, Patricia, I answered, already knowing this conversation was going to be about as pleasant as a root canal performed with rusty garden tools. Oh, honey, she started, her voice dripping with that fake sympathy that older women perfect after decades of meddling in other people's business. I heard about your little fight with Marissa. She's absolutely heartbroken. Little fight. Right. Because public adultery followed by social media humiliation was just a little fight between married couples. Like arguing over whose turn it was to take out the trash. Patricia, I don't think Marissa gave you the full story, I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though I wanted to scream into the phone. She told me everything. Patricia interrupted, her tone shifting from sympathetic to defensive faster than a NASCAR driver changing lanes. She said you got jealous over her talking to an old friend, and now you're punishing her with this silent treatment. Honestly, I'm disappointed in you. Talking to an old friend. That's what we were calling tongue wrestling your ex-boyfriend now. The English language was truly a beautiful thing in the hands of someone determined to rewrite reality. She kissed him, Patricia, at a party, in front of 30 people, then posted videos of herself making out with other guys on Instagram. Silence. Then, well, she was drinking. You know how girls get when they've had a few. She doesn't handle alcohol well. The excuse-making was Olympic level. Apparently, alcohol was a magical substance that temporarily erased marriage vows and common decency. Who knew? Drinking doesn't make you cheat, I said. It just removes the inhibition to do what you already wanted to do. Don't be so dramatic, Patricia snapped. Marriage is about forgiveness. It's about working through problems together, not running away at the first sign of trouble. First sign of trouble. Like I'd bailed after she left a dirty dish in the sink instead of after months of gaslighting followed by public adultery. She loves you. Patricia continued, really warming up to her speech now. She made a mistake, a silly, drunk mistake, and now you're throwing away 3 years of marriage over it. Don't you think that's a bit extreme? There it was again. The minimization, the blame shifting, the complete refusal to acknowledge what had actually happened. Marissa had learned these tactics somewhere, and now I knew where. The apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. It had barely rolled off the branch. I appreciate your concern. I lied through my teeth. But this is between Marissa and me. That poor girl is beside herself. Patricia pressed on, apparently immune to social cues about ending conversations. She can barely eat, can barely sleep. Is this really what you want? To hurt someone you claim to love? Poor girl. The poor girl who'd spent last Saturday grinding on strangers and broadcasting it to the world. My heart was absolutely breaking for her. I hung up. Within an hour, my own phone rang again. This time it was my mother, Elaine, and the fury in her voice was immediately apparent. What the hell is wrong with you? She started without preamble. Patricia Williams just called me crying about how you're treating Marissa. She says you're being cruel and vindictive over some silly party incident. Oh, perfect. The mothers had formed an alliance. This was exactly what my Friday needed. A tag team guilt session from 2 women who'd gotten a completely fabricated version of events. Mom, let me explain what actually. No, you let me explain something, she interrupted, her voice hitting that particular frequency that meant she was in full lecture mode. Marriage isn't easy. It takes work, compromise, and forgiveness. You can't just throw it away because your wife had a few drinks and talked to an old friend. Talk to an old friend. Jesus Christ, the narrative was evolving faster than a virus. First it was talking, then it became being friendly, and apparently now it was just casual conversation with a former acquaintance. She didn't just talk to him, Mom. I don't want to hear excuses. Elaine cut me off. Patricia told me everything. Marissa was being social at a party. You got jealous. And now you're punishing her by refusing to communicate. That's not how marriage works. The irony was suffocating. My mother was lecturing me about how marriage works based on information from the woman whose daughter had just publicly cheated on me. It was like getting relationship advice from someone whose primary source was a pathological liar. You need to apologize, she continued, really hitting her stride now. You need to go home, sit down with your wife, and work this out like adults. This silent treatment nonsense is childish and cruel. I could hear my father in the background asking what was going on. More voices joining the conversation. Apparently, this had turned into a family conference call about my failing marriage. Perfect. Nothing says healthy relationship dynamics, like having your parents gang up on you based on your cheating wife's victim narrative. She says you've been acting unstable lately, Mom added, and that word hit me like a slap. Patricia's worried about your mental state. Maybe you should talk to someone, get some help. Unstable. Now I was mentally ill for not wanting to be married to someone who treated our vows like suggestions. The gaslighting had reached professional levels. Not only was I wrong for being upset, I was literally crazy for having feelings about public infidelity. That's when something inside me finally snapped. Not in a violent way, but in a clarity way. Like fog lifting to reveal the landscape you've been stumbling through blind. Mom, I need to send you something, I said, putting the call on speaker and opening my phone's photo gallery. Give me your number. What? What? Just trust me. I think you need to see what really happened before you lecture me about forgiveness. I could hear her dictating her number to Dad, probably thinking I was about to send her some ridiculous evidence of my paranoia. Boy, was she in for a treat. I forwarded her the screenshots, all of them. The Instagram stories, the text messages, the whole digital record of Saturday night's festivities. Every caption, every video, every piece of evidence that proved Marissa's version of events was complete fiction. Look at your phone, I said. Silence. Then rustling sounds as she presumably opened the messages. Then a long, sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, she whispered. Keep scrolling, I said. There's more. More silence. More rustling. Then my father's voice in the background. What is it, Elaine? What's wrong? She posted videos of herself. Mom's voice trailed off like she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. Keep going, I said grimly. You haven't gotten to the good part yet. Another minute passed. I could hear my parents whispering to each other, their voices getting more upset with each screenshot. The caption says, "Single life hits different," Mom said finally, her voice hollow. She's dancing with 3 different men. Now do you understand why I'm not rushing to apologize? I asked. Jesus Christ. Dad's voice came through clearly now. Son, I'm sorry. We had no idea. Because she lied to you, I said. Just like she's been lying to me for months. Patricia called you with a completely made-up version of events, and you believed it because why wouldn't you? Who lies about something like this? Sociopaths, Aaron said from behind me. I hadn't heard him approach, but apparently he'd come down to check on me and caught the tail end of my family conference call. Sociopaths lie about stuff like this. Mom was quiet for a long moment. Then, honey, I owe you an enormous apology. Patricia painted a completely different picture. She said Marissa was being friendly and you got upset over nothing. She's been calling me unstable and vindictive, I said, telling everyone who'll listen that I'm mentally ill for not wanting my wife to cheat on me. That manipulative little, Dad started, then caught himself. I'm sorry, son. We should have listened to your side first. It's fine, I said, though it really wasn't. Now you know why I'm not answering her calls. Good, Mom said firmly. Don't answer them. That girl needs to face consequences for once in her life. The conversation ended with promises to support whatever decision I made and threats to give Patricia a piece of their mind the next time she called with Marissa's sob stories. Apparently, seeing actual evidence had a way of clarifying things that emotional manipulation couldn't overcome. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had people in my corner who understood what I was dealing with. People who'd seen the evidence and recognized it for what it was. Calculated cruelty disguised as drunken mistakes. Aaron clapped me on the shoulder. Man, that was brutal to watch, but you handled it perfectly. Thanks for having my back, I said. Always, he replied. Besides, now the whole office knows your wife's crazy. That should make the divorce proceedings interesting. Divorce. The word didn't scare me anymore. If anything, it sounded like freedom. You know what they say about cornered animals? They get vicious. Well, turns out cornered wives who've lost control of their narrative don't just get vicious. They go full psycho stalker mode. And let me tell you, having your own spouse transform into your personal nightmare is exactly as fun as it sounds. When Marissa realized that public humiliation and family manipulation weren't working, she decided to take her show on the road. Literally. The woman who'd spent months calling me obsessed had apparently decided to give me a masterclass in what actual obsession looked like. It started with the late-night text bombardments. I'm talking military-level psychological warfare through digital communication. One night, I'll never forget it because I actually counted. She sent me 29 text messages between 2 and 5 a.m. 29. That's roughly one every 6 minutes for 3 straight hours. The dedication was almost impressive if it wasn't so completely unhinged. The messages themselves were a roller coaster of emotion that would have given a therapist enough material for a doctoral thesis. She'd start sweet. Baby, I miss you so much. Please just talk to me. Then escalate to desperate. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I feel like I'm dying without you. Then spiral into rage. You're being a fucking child. This is ridiculous. My personal favorite from that particular night was, you're destroying everything over one joke. One joke. Do you hear how insane that sounds? One joke. She was still calling it a joke. Making out with her ex-boyfriend in front of 30 people while her friends filmed it was apparently peak comedy. I should have been laughing instead of filing for divorce, according to Marissa's twisted logic. But the real gems came around 4 a.m. when the alcohol or desperation or whatever demon was possessing her really took hold. I can't live without you. I'll make sure you regret this. You think you're so perfect, but you're not. I know things about you that would destroy you. Please, baby, please, please, please call me back. I fucking hate you. I didn't mean that I love you so much. Reading through them the next morning was like watching someone have a complete mental breakdown in real time via text message. The woman who'd spent months gaslighting me about being obsessive was sending me novel-length messages in the middle of the night, threatening me 1 minute and professing love the next. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But text messages were apparently just the opening act. Tuesday evening, I came home from work to find my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, waiting for me in her front yard with this expression that said she had some serious tea to spill. Your wife's been sitting on your parents' porch since noon, she informed me, clearly delighted to be the bearer of dramatic news. Just sitting there, crying. Wouldn't leave when your dad asked her to. My parents' house. She'd driven 20 minutes across town to stage a sit-in at my childhood home. The woman who couldn't be bothered to text me back for hours when we were actually together had apparently developed the patience of a monk when it came to stalking my family. I called my dad. Yeah, she's still here, he confirmed, his voice tight with frustration. Been here for 6 hours now. Every time we ask her to leave, she starts crying about how she needs to explain herself to you. What's she saying? The usual bullshit, Dad replied, and I could hear Mom agreeing in the background. She's going on about your good memories, holidays, trips, anniversaries, making it sound like you're throwing away years of happiness over nothing. Good memories. Sure, we'd had some. Every toxic relationship does. That's how they keep you hooked. But a few good moments don't erase months of systematic disrespect and public humiliation. A romantic vacation doesn't cancel out coming home to find your wife posting videos of herself making out with strangers. She keeps saying it was just one bad night, Dad continued. That she was peer pressured into it. That the alcohol made her do things she didn't mean. But son, I've seen those videos. That wasn't peer pressure. That was someone who wanted to hurt you. Bingo. Even my parents, who'd been married for 35 years and believed in working through problems, could see what Marissa was trying to hide behind her victim act. She's not taking responsibility for anything. Mom called out loud enough for me to hear. It's all excuses and blame shifting. The alcohol made me do it. My friends dared me. He should have trusted me more. Everything except I fucked up and I'm sorry. Around 7 p.m., Dad had apparently reached his limit. Look, honey, I heard him say in the background, his voice getting closer to the phone. You need to leave now? This isn't your house, and you're not welcome here anymore. I just need him to understand. Came Marissa's voice, faint but audible through the phone. We had such beautiful memories together. Our first Christmas, that trip to Napa, our anniversary dinner. Doesn't that count for something? Beautiful memories. She was right. We had made some good ones. But you know what's funny about memories? They don't mean much when the person you made them with turns out to be someone completely different than who you thought they were. Those memories don't excuse what you did, Dad said firmly. And they don't entitle you to camp out on our porch until you get your way. I can't live without him, Marissa said, her voice breaking. You don't understand. I made one mistake. One stupid, drunk mistake. And he's ready to throw away 3 years of marriage. One mistake. There it was again. The party, the Instagram stories, the public humiliation, the complete lack of accountability, all condensed into one convenient little mistake that I was being unreasonable for caring about. It wasn't a mistake. Mom's voice came through clearly now. Mistakes are accidental. What you did was intentional, cruel, and designed to hurt our son. And now you're trying to manipulate us into fixing what you broke. I could hear Marissa starting to cry. Real tears this time, not the calculated ones she usually deployed. But even through the sobs, she was still making excuses. The girls dare me to do it, she sobbed. They said I was too controlled by him, that I needed to prove I was my own person. It was peer pressure. I was drunk. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Peer pressure. At 28 years old. Married. With a mortgage and a joint bank account. But sure, blame it on peer pressure like she was a teenager at her first kegger. You're an adult, Dad said bluntly. Adults don't use peer pressure as an excuse for destroying their marriages. Please, Marissa begged. Just let me talk to him for 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain. He doesn't want to talk to you, Mom said. And frankly, after seeing what you did, I don't blame him. The conversation went on for another hour, my parents basically tag-teaming her with reality while she cried and made excuses. Finally, Dad delivered the ultimatum. You have 5 minutes to get off our property, or I'm calling the police. Fine, Marissa said, her voice shifting from desperate to cold in an instant. But this isn't over. That's when I knew I was dealing with someone who'd completely lost touch with reality. She'd publicly cheated, lied to both our families, stalked me for a week, and was now making threats because I wouldn't accept her non-apology for behavior that would make a soap opera villain blush. Did you hear that? Dad asked into the phone. I heard it, I confirmed. And it's exactly why I'm not going back to her. This wasn't over, according to Marissa. Well, she was right about that. But it wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. She'd escalated from manipulation to stalking to threats, and each move just proved how right I'd been to walk away. Time to set a trap. Sometimes the best way to catch a liar is to give them enough rope to hang themselves with. And after a week of Marissa's increasingly unhinged behavior, I realized she was practically begging for that rope. All I had to do was hand it to her with a smile and let her do what she did best, destroy herself with her own words. Thursday morning, I crafted the text message that would either end this nightmare or escalate it to levels that would require legal intervention. Either way, I'd have my answer about who I was really married to. We should talk privately. No interruptions. No family, no friends, just us. I think we owe each other that much. I hit send and watched the 3 dots appear almost immediately. She was probably staring at her phone, trying to decode whether this was surrender or another trap. The response came back in under 30 seconds. Yes, thank you. When and where? The desperation was palpable even through text. All caps, yes, like I'd just offered her a life preserver while she was drowning. Which, in a way, I guess I had. She was drowning in her own lies and manipulation, and I was offering her what looked like salvation. Saturday, 2 p.m. Your apartment. Just us. Perfect. I love you so much. We're going to fix this. Fix this. Right. Because there was definitely a way to fix public adultery followed by a week of stalking and family manipulation. Some problems are like a shattered mirror. You can try to glue the pieces back together, but it'll never look the same, and you'll always see the cracks. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I spent Friday night preparing like I was going into battle, which in a way I was. I charged my phone to 100%, tested the recording app 3 times, and mentally rehearsed the conversation I was about to have. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about getting the truth on record. Her apartment complex looked the same as always, but somehow everything felt different as I walked up to her door. Maybe because the last time I'd been here, I'd still believed our marriage was salvageable. Now I knew better. She answered the door before I could knock, which meant she'd been watching for me through the window like a lovesick teenager. The sight of her hit me harder than I'd expected, not because I missed her, but because of how obviously calculated everything was. The apartment was spotless. Not just clean, spotless. Every surface gleamed, every throw pillow was perfectly positioned, and there wasn't a single dish in the sink. Marissa had clearly spent hours preparing for this meeting, staging the environment to remind me of the domestic bliss we'd supposedly shared. She'd chosen her outfit just as carefully. A simple sundress that hit just above the knee, conservative enough to suggest she was a reformed woman, fitted enough to remind me what I was supposedly giving up. Her makeup was minimal but perfect, like she'd spent an hour creating the illusion of natural beauty. Her hair was styled in soft waves that made her look younger, more innocent. The whole scene screamed, loving wife waiting for her husband to come to his senses. It was masterful manipulation disguised as domestic normalcy. You came, she said softly, stepping back to let me in. Her voice was gentle, vulnerable, completely different from the woman who'd threatened me on my parents' porch 3 days earlier. I said I would. I replied, slipping my phone into my jacket pocket with the recording app already running. We need to talk. She'd prepared refreshments, my favorite beer, homemade cookies, even the good cheese and crackers she usually saved for company. Every detail was designed to remind me of what I was walking away from, to make me feel like an idiot for throwing away someone who clearly cared about making me comfortable. Sit, she said, patting the couch beside her. Please. I chose the chair across from her instead. Distance was important for what was coming next, both physical and emotional. Her face fell slightly at my seating choice, but she recovered quickly. I'm glad you're here, she said, folding her hands in her lap like a repentant schoolgirl. I've had so much time to think this week, and I realize how badly I screwed up. Screwed up? Interesting word choice. Not betrayed our marriage or humiliated you publicly. Just screwed up, like she'd forgotten to pick up milk from the store. Tell me about it, I said, settling back in the chair. Help me understand what happened that night. She took a deep breath, and I could see her accessing her prepared speech. This was going to be good. It was peer pressure, she began, her voice soft and ashamed. I know that sounds stupid at our age, but you don't know how the girls can be. They've been saying for months that you're too controlling, that I don't have enough freedom. Ah, there it was. Even in her confession, she was blaming me. I was too controlling, which justified her friends pressuring her to cheat. Beautiful logic. Go on, I said neutrally. They said I needed to prove I wasn't under your thumb, she continued, warming up to her victim narrative. That I should show everyone I could do what I wanted. It was like a dare, you know? Like, if you're really free, prove it. A dare. 28-year-old married women apparently still played truth or dare, and the dare was to destroy their marriages in front of an audience. The maturity level was staggering. So you kissed Logan because your friends dared you to? Yes, she said eagerly, like I'd finally understood her brilliant reasoning. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about wanting him. It was about proving I wasn't controlled by you. The twisted logic was amazing. She'd publicly cheated on me to prove she wasn't controlled by me, which somehow made it better than if she'd just wanted to cheat. Like the motivation mattered more than the action. And the Instagram stories? I asked. Was that also peer pressure? She had the grace to look embarrassed about that. I was drunk and angry, she admitted. I felt like you'd abandoned me at the party, left me there to deal with everyone staring and whispering. So I wanted you to feel what I was feeling, what she was feeling. She'd felt abandoned, so she decided to make me feel humiliated. Eye for an eye, except in her version, public adultery was equivalent to leaving a party early. The thing is, she continued, leaning forward with this earnest expression, Logan was invited by the girls specifically. They planned this whole thing to test whether you really trusted me. Wait, what? They invited your ex-boyfriend to test my trust? I asked, making sure I was hearing this correctly. They wanted to see if you'd freak out or be cool about it. She explained like this made perfect sense. And when you got all jealous and possessive, it kind of proved their point. The mental gymnastics required to make this my fault were truly Olympic level. Her friends had orchestrated a situation designed to trigger jealousy. She'd responded by making out with her ex, and somehow this proved I was the problem for not being cool with orchestrated adultery. I regret it, she said suddenly, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine emotion. I regret all of it. The kissing, the stories, everything. I just wanted to feel free for one night, and it got completely out of hand. Free. There was that word again. Freedom from the oppressive burden of not cheating on your spouse. Do you still have contact with Logan? I asked. No, she said quickly. Too quickly. That night was it. I swear. I haven't talked to him since. What about the other guys from the party? What other guys? But her eyes shifted when she said it, and I knew she was lying. The ones you were dancing with. The ones in the stories. Oh, them. No, those were just random people. I don't even remember their names. Random people she'd been grinding on and making out with. Random people whose hands had been all over my wife while she documented it for posterity. But she didn't even remember their names, so that made it okay. I know this looks bad, she said, reaching across the space between us like she wanted to touch me but didn't quite dare. But you have to understand, I was hurt and angry and drunk, and I made terrible decisions. But they were just decisions, not reflections of how I feel about you. Terrible decisions. That's what we were calling it now. Not betrayal, not adultery, not public humiliation. Just some unfortunate decision-making that happened to involve her tongue in other men's mouths. "I love you," she said, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked genuinely vulnerable. "I love you so much that the thought of losing you is killing me. This week has been the worst week of my entire life." The worst week of her life. She'd spent it stalking me, manipulating our families, and making threats, but it had been terrible for her. The victim complex was truly astounding. "I know I hurt you," she continued, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I know I crossed lines I shouldn't have crossed. But please, please don't let one night destroy everything we've built together." One night. Still minimizing, still trying to compress months of disrespect and a public betrayal into a single evening of poor judgment. I leaned forward, making sure my voice was gentle and understanding. "I need to see what really happened that night," I said. "I need to understand the full scope of what I'm supposed to forgive." She blinked, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean? Do you have videos from that night? From your phone or from your friends? I need to see everything if I'm going to move past this." The request hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. She could refuse and prove she was still hiding things, or she could comply and show me evidence that would probably destroy any chance of reconciliation. Her face went through a complex series of emotions: hope, fear, calculation, resignation. Finally, she reached for her phone. "There might be a few," she said hesitantly, "but they look worse than they actually were. You have to understand, phones make everything seem more dramatic than it really was." "Phones don't lie," I thought. "People do." She unlocked her phone with trembling fingers, opened her photo gallery, and hesitated for a moment before turning the screen toward me. "These don't tell the whole story," she said as I took the phone from her hands. She was right about that. They told a much worse story than I'd imagined. Taking Marissa's phone felt like accepting a loaded weapon from someone who'd already shot you once. I knew whatever was on that device would either confirm my worst fears or reveal something so much worse that my current nightmare would look like a pleasant daydream by comparison. The photo gallery opened to her recent pictures, and Jesus Christ, it was like scrolling through the digital documentation of a marriage's death. She had 15 videos from Derek's party. 15. Not the 7 Instagram stories I'd seen. Those were apparently just the highlight reel. She'd been documenting the whole night, like she was making a fucking documentary about infidelity. "Start with that one," she said nervously, pointing to a video thumbnail that showed her laughing with a group of people. "But remember, it looks worse on camera than it actually was." "Right. Because cameras are notorious for making innocent behavior look slutty. Everyone knows phones have that special, make everything seem like cheating filter built right in." I hit play on the first video and immediately understood why she'd been hesitant to show me. This wasn't just dancing or innocent flirting. This was my wife performing for the camera like she was auditioning for a reality show called How to Destroy Your Marriage in 10 Easy Steps. The video showed her grinding against some guy I didn't recognize, her hands in his hair while he gripped her waist. But the worst part wasn't even the physical contact. It was her face. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months. Genuinely, radiantly happy in a way that made my stomach turn. "See," she said quickly as the video ended. "It's just dancing. Everyone was dancing like that. Everyone. Right. Because grinding on strangers was apparently the universal dance style at parties now. I must have missed that memo from the International Dance Committee." "Next one," I said, scrolling to the second video. This one was worse. Much worse. It showed her whispering something into Logan's ear while he laughed and pulled her closer. The intimacy was obvious, undeniable. These weren't the actions of someone being peer pressured into proving a point. These were the actions of someone who wanted to be exactly where she was. "What are you whispering to him?" I asked. "I don't remember," she said quickly. "I was drunk. It was small talk." "Sure. Because everyone whispers sweet nothings about the weather and current events into their ex-boyfriend's ear while pressing their body against his." The third video made me want to throw her phone against the wall. It was the kiss, the one I'd witnessed in person, but filmed from a different angle. I could see her friends in the background, Grace holding up her own phone to record, Tina clapping and laughing. Leah cheering like this was the greatest moment in human history. But what I hadn't seen from across the room was Marissa's reaction after the kiss ended. She looked directly into Grace's camera and smiled. Not an embarrassed, oops, I can't believe I just did that smile, but a triumphant, satisfied grin that said mission accomplished. You smiled? I said, pausing the video on her face. Right after you kissed him, you looked into the camera and smiled. I was drunk, she repeated, but her voice was getting smaller. I wasn't thinking clearly. You look pretty clear-headed to me, I said, scrolling to the next video. Let's keep going. Video 4 showed her accepting drinks from multiple guys, laughing and flirting like she was working the room at a singles bar. Video 5 was her slow dancing with someone who definitely wasn't Logan, her head on his shoulder, looking content and peaceful. You're making this seem worse than it was, she said, her voice taking on that defensive edge I knew so well. Everyone was drinking, everyone was having fun. It wasn't personal. Not personal. Making out with her ex-boyfriend while her husband watched wasn't personal. The logic was bulletproof. Videos 6 through 10 were a montage of escalating behavior. More dancing, more touching, more intimate moments with men who weren't her husband. Each one was a little knife twist, but I kept my expression neutral. I was gathering evidence, not getting emotionally invested in the train wreck I was watching. Video 11 made my blood pressure spike. It showed her in a corner of Derek's living room with two guys I didn't recognize, all three of them laughing while one of them kissed her neck. She looked like she was having the time of her life. Who are these guys? I asked. I don't know, she admitted. Friends of Derek's, maybe? Everyone was just loose that night. Inhibited. It was that kind of party. That kind of party. The kind where married women make out with strangers while their husbands watch. Apparently, I'd been going to the wrong kinds of parties my whole life. Keep going, I said. Videos 12 and 13 were more of the same. My wife treating Derek's birthday party like her personal sexual awakening tour. But video 14 was where things got really interesting. It started after I'd left the party, based on the timestamp. The video showed Marissa back with Logan, but this time there was no audience of friends cheering her on. This was just them, in what looked like Derek's bedroom, and holy shit, this wasn't just kissing anymore. Logan's hands were everywhere, under her dress, in her hair, gripping her ass while she kissed him with the kind of passion I hadn't seen from her in our bedroom in over a year. She was pressed against the wall, her legs wrapped around his waist, and the sounds she was making. Turn it off, she said suddenly, lunging for the phone. That's enough. But I pulled it away, pausing the video on a frame that showed her face in profile. She looked lost in the moment, completely absorbed in what she was doing. This wasn't peer pressure or drunken mistakes or proving a point to her friends. This was a woman getting exactly what she wanted. It looks worse on video, she said desperately. Cameras make everything seem more intense. Marissa, I said calmly. His hands were under your dress. It didn't go that far, she said quickly. We just kissed. It looked like more, but it was just kissing. Just kissing. With his hands up her dress, her legs around his waist, pressed against a wall in someone's bedroom. The definition of just kissing had apparently expanded significantly since I last checked. There's one more, I said, scrolling to video 15. No, she said, reaching for the phone again. You don't need to see that one. It's not important. Not important. Which meant it was the most important one of all. I hit play before she could stop me. The final video was a masterpiece of betrayal. It showed the aftermath, Marissa and Logan fixing their clothes, laughing about something, her running her fingers through her hair to make it look less like she'd been horizontal 5 minutes earlier. You could hear her voice clearly. God, I needed that. I forgot how good we were together. I forgot how good we were together. She'd said that about her ex-boyfriend. About the man she'd just been intimate with in someone else's bedroom while her husband drove home alone. Turn it off, she whispered, her face completely drained of color. But I let it play to the end, where Logan kissed her forehead and said, "Call me tomorrow." And she responded with, "Definitely." Definitely. She'd planned to call him the next day. This wasn't a one-time drunken mistake. It was the beginning of something. I set her phone down on the coffee table and looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman sitting across from me bore no resemblance to the person I'd married. That person had been caring, honest, loyal. This person was a stranger wearing my wife's face. It looks worse than it was, she said again, but her voice was barely audible now. Actually, I said, reaching into my pocket, I think it looks exactly like what it was. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. The red recording light was blinking steadily, and the timer showed 37 minutes and counting. Her face went completely white. You recorded this? Every word, I confirmed. Your confession about the peer pressure, the plan set up with Logan, the admission that you were going to call him the next day. All of it. She stared at my phone like it was a venomous snake. You tricked me. No, I said. I gave you a chance to tell the truth, and you chose to lie instead. Even when you thought we were reconciling. Even when you thought I was coming back to you. You still couldn't be honest about what happened. The tears started then. Real ones this time. Not the calculated crying she'd been using all week. These were the tears of someone who'd just realized they'd completely fucked themselves over. Please don't use that recording, she begged. Please. I'll do anything. I'll delete everything. I'll never talk to Logan again. I'll change completely. Too late, I said, standing up. You had a week to tell me the truth. Instead, you lied to me, stalked me, manipulated our families, and just now tried to gaslight me even when you thought we were getting back together. She collapsed forward, her head in her hands. Oh God, what have I done? You showed me exactly who you really are, I said, and I'm finally smart enough to believe you. Chapter 10, Her Collapse, My Freedom. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. But let me tell you something. Revenge served with digital evidence and family group chats hits different. It's not just cold. It's Arctic fucking freeze your soul solid satisfying. I sat in my car outside Marissa's apartment building for exactly 3 minutes, composing the message that would end this nightmare once and for all. The recording was already uploaded to the cloud. The videos were saved in multiple locations, and I had enough evidence to convince anyone with half a brain that my wife was a lying, cheating sociopath who tried to gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. Time to share the wealth. I created a group message that included both sets of parents and Clara, the nuclear option, the digital equivalent of dropping a truth bomb on everyone who'd been fed Marissa's victim narrative for the past week. The message was simple. Since there seems to be confusion about what happened at Derek's party, I thought everyone should see the actual evidence. Then I attached everything. The videos from her phone showing the escalating infidelity, the audio recording of her confession where she admitted it was all planned, the screenshots of her Instagram stories where she'd called herself single. 3 years of marriage reduced to a digital evidence folder that painted a picture so damning it would make a prosecutor weep with joy. I hit send and watched my phone light up like a Christmas tree. My mom texted back within 30 seconds. Proud of you, son. Dad followed immediately. She's finished. Good riddance. Clara's response was pure poetry. Holy shit. What a psychopath. I'm changing the locks on my house in case she shows up here too. But the real entertainment came from Marissa's parents. 20 minutes of absolute silence, then a curt message from Patricia. Marissa, come home immediately. No apology for calling me vindictive. No acknowledgement that they'd spent the week harassing me based on complete lies. Just a summons for their daughter to return home and face whatever music was about to play. I was still sitting in my car, watching the digital fireworks, when Marissa came stumbling out of her building. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Which, in a way, she had. The ghost of her carefully constructed lies, now thoroughly dead and buried. She spotted my car and ran toward it like I was her last hope for salvation. I rolled down the window, curious to hear what excuse she'd come up with for this latest development. You sent it to everyone, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My parents, your parents, everyone. Just the people you lied to, I replied calmly. Seemed like they deserved to know the truth. She collapsed against my car door, literally fell to her knees on the asphalt like some kind of dramatic movie heroine. Don't do this, she begged, grabbing my arm through the open window. Please. I'll do anything. I'll delete everything. I'll change completely. I'll never see Logan again. Too late for all that, I said, gently but firmly removing her hand from my arm. You had multiple chances to tell the truth. Instead, you chose to lie, manipulate, and gaslight everyone who cared about you. I was scared, she sobbed. I was scared you'd leave me if you knew the whole truth. The irony was beautiful. She'd been scared I'd leave her if I knew the truth, so she'd decided to lie about it, which guaranteed I'd leave her when I eventually found out. The logic was flawless. This is the last time we'll ever speak. I told her, my voice steady and final. Contact me again, directly or through other people, and I'll file harassment charges. Her face crumpled completely. You can't mean that. We're married. We took vows. Yeah, we did, I agreed. You broke them. I'm honoring the part about till death do us part. This marriage died last Saturday night. I started the engine, and she stumbled backward but didn't leave. Just stood there in the parking lot, crying and broken, finally experiencing the consequences of her actions. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror. She was still on her knees, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling anyone who might listen to her latest sob story about the cruel husband who'd abandoned her. My phone started buzzing before I'd made it out of the parking lot. Voice message after voice message, 20 of them in the span of 10 minutes. Don't do this. Please. I'm sorry, I'm so fucking sorry. Answer me. You can't just leave it like this. I'll kill myself if you don't come back. Please, I'm begging you. Each message was more hysterical than the last, her voice getting higher and more desperate with every plea. But here's the beautiful thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're there, threats of going deeper don't scare you anymore. I turned my phone off and smiled. Actually smiled, for the first time in months that wasn't forced or fake. The silence was incredible. No buzzing, no notifications, no emotional manipulation disguised as love. Just pure, clean quiet that felt like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long. That night, I sat on my couch, our couch, and ordered pizza for one. I watched whatever I wanted on TV without negotiating. I went to bed at a reasonable hour without waiting for someone to come home from God knows where. I slept through the night without being woken up by drunk confessions or late-night phone calls. It was the most peaceful night I'd had in years. Sunday morning brought a knock at my door, not frantic pounding or dramatic sobbing, just a quiet knock. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman I didn't recognize holding an envelope. "Process server," she said when I opened the door. "Are you Marcus Thompson?" "That's me." "These are for you," she said, handing me the envelope with a sympathetic smile. "Sorry about your situation." Inside were divorce papers. Marissa had beaten me to the punch by exactly 12 hours. I laughed out loud reading through them. She was citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abandonment. The woman who'd publicly cheated on me was claiming I'd abandoned her emotionally. The victim narrative was so strong it had survived, even filing for divorce. But buried in the legal language was the real kicker. She was asking for alimony. The woman who destroyed our marriage was demanding I pay her for the privilege of being rid of her. I called my lawyer Monday morning. By Tuesday, I'd filed my counterpetition with enough evidence to convince any judge that Marissa's version of events was complete fiction. The videos, the recording, the text messages, everything was documented, cataloged, and ready for court. She'd thought cheating on me to my face would put me in my place. She'd thought I'd crawl back like I always had, desperate and apologetic and grateful for whatever scraps of affection she was willing to throw me. Instead, I'd walked away, and I'd left her to drown in her own lies. The freedom was intoxicating. No more walking on eggshells, no more making excuses for someone else's shitty behavior, no more pretending that disrespect was love. For the first time in years, I could breathe.